And good morning. Huggies. We are here for day 7 of the Chad Daybell trial. And we will be continuing Melanie Gibb's cross-examination, which I chose to describe in my title as prickly. It ended basically on a cliffhanger yesterday as defense attorney John Pryor was questioning her, and they needed to end at a certain time. He was basically going at 50 miles an hour and came to a screeching halt in his questioning because time was up. He's like, "Well, I'm going to have to get to that tomorrow." So that's what we have to look forward to as they open things up today, but they haven't opened up yet. Please remember to hit the thumbs up. Thank you very much. Now, also, something else happened very interesting yesterday at the end of the day. So the reason they closed at 3:15 is because there was a hearing. And you may recall that just before trial started, just before they started jury selection, I posted something on my community wall saying that there was a motion filed at the very last minute trying to pause the proceedings, trying to delay the proceedings. And, it's really hard to tell if it's a legitimate, motion or not. And nothing was ever said after it was filed. It was filed at the last minute, like Friday night, the night before they were supposed to start trial. And nothing was ever really said about it, but the request was for an emergency hearing. Well, Judge Boyce held that hearing yesterday, and he was pissed because apparently this motion was filed by a lawyer who said that good morning, Tiggy girl, who said that he was representing Chad Daybell, but he's not. He's not on the record as representing Chad Daybell. And he came in and he when he filed the motion, it had multiple spelling errors, and again, it was filed at the last minute, and gave the court absolutely no time to respond. Yeah, gave no time to respond. So the judge set a hearing for yesterday. This man showed up with another lawyer to represent him. And they didn't even it was crazy. They didn't even get to the meat of the reason that the guy wanted the trial to be paused. He, because the judge just wanted to sanction him as a lawyer for filing basically for faulty paperwork. Not very well. Couldn't hear him very well. So, but you could hear Judge Boyce being pretty irritated at him. And it was very interesting. And I didn't know that was happening. So when there is a break in the action, so, they should be coming on any moment into court. I don't want to, thank you for reminding me to turn on captions. And on this stream, captions are unavailable. Huh. Let's see if captions are available on a different stream. find that interesting that captions aren't available on that. Okay, so I'm switching streams so that closed caption is available. See? Yeah, Judge was very irritated. It was trippy. He even introduced the entire conversation by saying, "I don't know if I'm more pissed now or if I was more angry then or more angry now as I discuss this." So I don't blame him. And at one point, the lawyer that was representing the lawyer said something about, well, Judge, if we had had time to, respond to this hearing, we didn't really have much time. And I guess the judge is like, I'm sorry, did I inconvenience? Was the short time frame inconvenience for you? The idea, I don't know, the situational awareness some people have or lack thereof is really interesting. Here they come.
Session, Honorable Stephen W. Boyce, presiding.
Thank you. Please be seated.
Oh, that's weird.
We have all 18. Yes. Okay. Okay, we're on the record again on case CR 22211623, State of Idaho versus Chad Guy Daybell. We're continuing with evidence this morning. The case in chief still presented by the state. The court notes that we do have all 18 jurors have returned and each have signed their juror affirmations this morning. So if we're ready to continue with evidence, it's cross-examination of Ms. Gibb this morning, who is returned on the witness stand. Is the state ready to proceed and have the jurors brought in?
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you.
From the defense?
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you.
Okay, we'll continue with that. And as I mentioned to counsel, we'll discuss as the day moves along what time we might conclude for the day, but we'll see how things are going in terms of length of this witness and the next. So if we'll go ahead and have the jurors brought in at this time, please, Mr. Bailiff.
Okay, y'all. How many times today are we going to see this?
Okay, that's okay. Okay, okay, right? Okay, right? Okay, right? Right? Okay, okay, okay.
I couldn't not put that together. He's just
Okay, that's okay. Okay, okay, right? Okay, right? Okay, right? Right? Okay, okay, okay.
I like that last one. Okay. Yeah, Truth Junkie, I like the way Judge Boyce handles his courtroom. I really do. He seems to have the appropriate emotional response to basic fuckery, right? This is interesting. So yesterday, or at least in previous days, the evidence screen
Four eyes, please.
in the Zoom view was on the left. Today it's on the right, and the witness is on the left, bottom left. And the Zoom and the evidence is on the bottom right. That I'm trying to figure out if the hello Rando, hello Johnny. I'm trying to figure out if that's good or bad. It might be good because I've been trying to focus in on the.
Your Honor, the jury is present and accounted for.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bailiff. Please be seated.
I guess this way it'll be kind of easier to have a good morning, Harlot.
All right, good morning, everyone. We are on the record on case CR 22-21-1623, State of Idaho versus Chad Guy Daybell. We're continuing with evidence in the case. Ms. Gibb is on the stand, having been previously sworn yesterday. This is continuing cross-examination. The court notes the presence of all 18 jurors properly seated as well. And the court will also indicate that each of the jurors has completed their juror affirmation for the morning. So thank you all for following the court's continuing admonition and instruction in that regard. With that, if we're ready to continue with cross, you can go ahead and take the podium, Mr. Pryor, and we'll continue.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right.
Isn't that nice that the judge takes the jurors through daily affirmations? I'm just kidding.
Before you begin your cross, Mr. Pryor, I'll just inquire of the witness. First, I'll remind you, you are still under oath, Ms. Gibb, and I'll ask, did you review anything about the case or your testimony or discuss your testimony with anyone else since last night when we concluded? Okay. She indicated no. So with that, Mr. Pryor, if you'd like to continue with cross, you can do that now.
Ms. Gibb, I want to go over just a couple of preliminary matters if we could first to start there, if that's okay with you.
Okay.
The first thing is you never did provide a hair sample to any law enforcement agency in this case. Is that right?
Correct.
You never turned over your phone or was requested to turn over your phone to any law enforcement agency. Is that correct?
Correct.
You were never requested or did turn over any email accounts or social media accounts to law enforcement at their request. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. You did, however, in 2021, provide a DNA sample to a Rexburg or a Fremont County officer a couple of years after this alleged incident. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. Now, I want to talk to you a little bit about an organization that I think you're affiliated with called Seven Gatherers. Are you familiar with the term Seven Gatherers?
I'm not.
You're not? Okay.
I've never heard of that either. Where did this random think? Foundation? Objection? Foundation?
Initially, there was some discussion about Chad and Lori. Obviously, we're getting very close during the early parts of January and February of 2019. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And at any time, did they talk about having a plan to spend their lives together?
At some point they did.
Do you recall when that was?
I would say they kind of talked about it in the beginning of their relationship about being part of the head of the 144,000. I would say within a month or two. I'm not sure exactly the day.
Well, I appreciate the religious references, but I was talking more on a personal note that they were planning if when Tammy passed away that they were going to spend their lives together. Did you ever overhear that kind of a discussion?
I guess kind of. Yeah.
And on that note, we previously touched on the fact that Chad and a number of his speaking engagements prior to even knowing Lori Vallow spoke about his, and I want to use the right word, his premonitions, I guess, about Tammy not having a long life. Recall that?
Yes.
And you were present for at least a couple of those, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So it was also common knowledge that Chad had openly discussed the fact that he felt his wife was not going to live long, well before he ever met Lori Vallow, right?
Right.
Okay. And in fact, you touched on that when you had one of your text message conversations with Prosecutor Wood. You had mentioned that, let me, do you recall having that discussion?
It's possible, but I don't recall it.
Okay. Is it possible that you told him that Chad made it known to a lot of his close friends that he knew that Tammy wasn't going to live long?
Yes.
Okay. And we don't need to go into that. Okay.
Pryor seems a little bit lost today.
Now, at no
On his
time
name.
did Chad Daybell ever tell you that he intended to do harm to Tammy Daybell, did he?
Correct.
And in fact, at no time did Chad Daybell ever tell you that he intended to do harm to JJ Vallow or Tylee Ryan.
Correct.
Okay. So this plan that they had to spend their lives together would only have occurred if either Chad divorced Tammy Daybell, or that if the premonition was accurate and Tammy had passed away, that they would be able to spend their lives together, right?
Yes.
Okay. I want to go back to the discussion in late November when you claim that you got a call from Chad about not wanting to talk to the police, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now, to put a little foundation in this, on the weekend of the 19th through the 23rd, you were at Lori Vallow's townhome that night, right?
Are you talking about November?
September of 19th through the 23rd, you were at,
Yes.
I'm
Yes.
just putting a little foundation in place. You were at there, and then you were, part of that was to go to a seminar. There were a number of other things as well, right?
Correct.
Okay. So in your eyes, that was the last time that you saw JJ Vallow alive, right?
Correct.
Okay. And did you later come to learn that the prosecutors in the state's allegations are that JJ was murdered at or around the time that you folks were there for that podcast?
I wasn't aware of that.
You've never become aware of that?
I wasn't aware that they were murdered. I knew that the word was missing.
Okay.
Yeah.
And subsequently, you've learned that the allegation is that there's an alleged murder that took place at or around the weekend of the 19th through the 23rd. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh,
Now, your testimony is that Chad Daybell called you and said, don't talk to the police. Is that what it
Correct.
was on the 19th? And do you remember the date of that?
I remember it was 2 or 3 days before Thanksgiving. So it was in November, whenever the Thanksgiving was.
And would the 25th of November ring a bell, possibly?
It's possible.
Okay. Okay. Now, prior to November 23rd, did you have any phone conversations with Lori Vallow giving you a warning that Chad was going to call you?
No.
Okay. But when Chad spoke with you at that time, he did tell you that Lori was going to get a hold of you afterwards, right?
Correct.
Okay. Well, Miss Gibb, isn't it true that on November 25th of 2019, Chad Daybell contacted you and specifically asked you, where is JJ Vallow?
And no.
Okay. And yet, during that conversation, he told you that Lori was going to be contacting you, right?
That's right.
And then after that, did Lori contact you?
She did.
And what was the discussion, Miss Gibb?
She told me that the police had come asking for JJ and that she had told them that I had JJ and that I needed to go to a movie called Frozen, take some pictures
Okay.
back. Yeah.
So your denial of the fact that Chad called you, you're denying the fact that Chad Daybell called you on the 25th, seeking out information as to where JJ Vallow is. You're denying that, right?
Yes.
Okay. But yet Lori Vallow calls you back after Chad Daybell and says, I need you to cover for me and tell the police that you have JJ Vallow, correct?
Correct.
Hey, but Mr. Daybell also during that conversation said, you're going to hear from Lori.
Correct.
Did Lori ever tell you, I told Chad that JJ was with you and go along with this story?
I don't believe so.
Okay, but you don't know for sure, do you?
I can't remember. I can't recall all the words I said to
Oh,
her.
okay. All right. Okay, fair enough. And then was it that day or was it the next day that the police officers called you?
It was the same day.
Okay. And at that point, you told them that you had JJ Vallow, didn't you?
Not initially, but by the end of the day, yes.
Okay. You basically told them during that day that you had possession of JJ Vallow. Is that right?
I said I had him and then I didn't have him.
Well, no,
That's
we're
the
going to
words
go
I
one at a
used.
time, ma'am.
Okay.
Ma'am.
At the first opportunity to have discussion with the police and discuss where JJ Vallow was, you told them you had JJ Vallow.
Correct.
Okay. So I'm having some difficulty with the fact that Chad's trying to cover something up. And yet after a phone call from Lori discussing to tell them that you had JJ, you suddenly go along and say, yes, I had JJ Vallow.
Or objection, this is a narrative. I'd ask to strike.
Sustained.
All right. And then at some point subsequent to that point, you decided to tell the police, well, I lied about this because I was having an emotional issue with how to deal with this, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And how long did it take you for you to have that emotional reflection to go back to the police and tell them, I'm not going along with this lie that Lori and I came up with?
A few weeks.
Objection, Your Honor, misstates the evidence.
It's already been answered by the witness. It's late, overruled.
Okay. A couple of weeks it took you to decide that I better tell the police the truth, right?
Right.
Okay.
Good morning, Delene. Wow, it took a couple weeks.
And then at some point you said that you decided to go and excuse me. You decided to go to the police to let them know what really happened. And that was the 2 weeks later, right?
However many times it was, how many weeks, yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. And then at some point yesterday, you testified that without talking to any law enforcement, you then took it upon yourself to record the conversation between you and Lori, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now, Ms. Gibb, and that occurred on about the 8th of December of 2019. Does that sound correct?
If you're referring to the recording, yes.
Recording, yes.
Mhm.
Does that sound correct?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Do you recall having a call to Ray Hermosillo?
Yes.
Right. And well, your testimony previously or yesterday was that you didn't talk to anybody from the police department before you made that call, correct?
Objection, Your Honor, misstates the evidence.
Overruled.
You testified that you did not call or talk to anybody with law enforcement prior to recording that call to Lori Vallow. Is that correct?
Your Honor, again, I'm going to object. This misstates her testimony.
I'll sustain that objection.
Okay. Did you have any contact with law enforcement prior to making that recorded call to Chad and Lori?
I wasn't aware of the dates, so I'm not sure exactly when those dates were.
Oh, so are you saying you did talk to law enforcement?
I did.
Oh, prior to it, right?
I'm not sure of the dates.
Okay. Well, would it refresh your recollection that there were 2 calls to the Rexburg police with Ray Hermosillo on the 6th of December and the 7th of December? Does that spark your memory a little bit?
No, I don't recall the dates.
Okay.
It's just your memory, not mine.
Okay. And you don't have any recollection of talking to the police beforehand then, right?
Beforehand, what?
Before you recorded the call to Chad?
I could have, or after, before. I didn't recall the timing.
Well, isn't it true you testified yesterday that you didn't talk to the police when it was inquired?
Objection, Your Honor. That misstates the testimony.
Sustained.
So you did talk to the police on the 6th and 7th with Ray Hermosillo by phone before you made that phone recording to Chad and Lori, right?
Objection, Your Honor. Asked and answered. She's already said she doesn't recall the dates.
I'll overrule that if she has any additional answer.
Ma'am?
You want to repeat the question, Mr.
Oh.
Pryor?
There was contact with law enforcement before you made that recording, right?
There was contact. I don't recall the time.
Okay. And you don't even recall the date, right?
No.
Okay. All right. Now, during that phone call, I touched on this yesterday a little bit. And Lori's comments on the phone call were, I had to move her somewhere else. Do you recall that?
Sounds familiar, yes.
Good
I will
morning.
do whatever the Lord needs me to do.
Right.
I love you so much. I know, and you said, I know you do, right?
Correct.
Okay. Now, I noticed during the phone call that the majority of the conversation was between you and Lori. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
And that the only time Chad got on the phone call is when he was talking about, his premonition about Tammy, and that he feels that someone's trying to jump on him as a result of this issue between you and Lori. Would that be fair?
Objection, Your Honor. The call speaks for itself, and that misstates what was in the call.
Sustained.
Okay. But you would agree with me that Chad was really not a primary or significant portion of that call, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, one of the things I took note of during the phone call was that Lori made the comment, you more than anyone else knows the truth when she was talking to you. Do you
Yeah.
recall that?
Yes.
Isn't it true, ma'am, that was a way for her to hide the fact that, Miss Gibb, you and Lori Vallow know the truth about what happened to JJ Vallow on the 23rd of September, correct?
Argumented it.
No.
Okay. How about the 22nd of September, ma'am?
No.
Okay. Isn't it true that Lori was being very vague on that phone call because Chad was there and she didn't want Chad to know that you were going to talk about the murder of JJ Vallow?
I have no idea what her agenda was.
Okay.
I find it hard to believe that Chad was on the outside of knowledge in that conversation. He's trying to make it sound like the only one who had knowledge of all the things that were happening in that conversation was Lori. And that's
Now, ma'am,
stretches credulity.
there's been some reference to names, people using different names, Chad, Lori, yourself, and the name James and Elena came up, right?
Yes.
You're familiar with that.
Yes.
Are you also familiar with the fact that that was a novel that Chad was writing about his relationship with Lori Vallow?
Yes.
Okay. So that all of that discussion about James and Elena was Chad using one of his personal experiences, maybe not a proper experience, but an experience about his relationship with Lori, and he assigned names to those two folks, correct?
I wouldn't know his agenda.
Okay. Now, you also
James and Elena
had a
looked
nickname
like
as
it was
well,
written
right?
in high school.
Yes.
Phoebe?
Yes. That sounds
Okay.
familiar.
You went by Phoebe? It's familiar?
Very occasionally, she would say that.
Okay.
Yes.
And Judge, this slide I'm about to show comes from Exhibit 7D, which was previously admitted by stipulation of the parties. I can show it to counsel if you like. Talking about the Elmo, and I'll try to navigate through that if I can. We'll see how well we do there.
Is this defense exhibit 70?
It is Defense Exhibit 7, Judge, and subsection D.
7. Okay.
7, I'm sorry, 7.
Right. That's the other
There-
That
thing we
Elmo
would have
has
to
both
believe.
a light and a zoom in out feature on it, Mr. Pryor.
We would have to believe he had no idea that those remains were in his yard, especially after sending
Warming up, Judge.
this text message about shooting a raccoon. I mean, clearly, and, you know, quote unquote alibi for shooting a gun in his yard. Whoever shot that gun, who knows? And then burying something in the pet cemetery. Come on, you guys. I mean, come on. Are we supposed to be dummies? I mean, can you imagine as these, you know,
Perfect.
Lori and Chad are
Can I have you
talking
stand
about
here
this?
for me?
How,
Okay.
okay, sorry.
So you previously discussed the fact that you never talked about dark portals or dark lives and things like that, correct?
I didn't go around teaching them to people that I can recall.
Okay, well, this is an email. I'll represent this as an email from Lori Vallow to you, and it says Phoebe. And then you responded with the email below, and I apologize for the print on there, but if you could read from thanks and go down to the bottom to me.
Thanks. I love you so much. I'm going to teach you right now, teaching about discerning and shutting off dark portals.
Now, I will represent to you that that was an email that was put together, and it was from you to Lori Vallow. Do you recall that?
I don't recall that email.
Okay. But in that email, you're talking about teaching people about dark portals. Correct?
It sounds like she said she was going to teach me.
Do we need to look at it again? Judge, could I approach the witness with the exhibit?
If you've got a printed copy, you can have the bailiff take the exhibit to the witness.
Yeah, does sound like something more Lori would say. So is this Pryor just not understanding how to read who is
Judge, may we approach briefly?
Yes.
For those of you who haven't seen it yet, we have officially memorialized Mr. Pryor's peccadillos.
Okay. That's okay. 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 Right? Okay. Right? Okay. Right? Right? Okay. Okay. Okay.
Okay. Okay. So I'm sort of kind of waiting on bated breath to see whether Mr. Pryor has misunderstood how to read a text message exchange. And that can happen sometimes with Luddites. Do you know what a Luddite is? Just somebody who doesn't know a lot about technology. And when he was reading that message, it sounded very much like something Lori would say. You're welcome, Truth Junkie. I love words. I love words. Anyway, so you're a Luddite, Stacy? I think a lot of people think they're Luddites, but they're not. But Pryor read the message. It sounded a lot like something Lori would say. He thinks Melanie said it. And yeah, words are a beautiful thing. Let me go off on a little bit of a tangent right now. When you think about it, when you live so much of your life online, you really need to understand how to communicate. And words are a major part of that. And the world is full of many shades, many colors, not just black and white. So it's good to know a lot of words to be able to be very descriptive. And I kind of like the idea of people having to Google something.
Ms. Gibb, have you had a
I
chance to
say.
read that?
Yes.
Mr. Bailiff, could I have that returned to me, please?
All right. What is the outcome of this? Did he misread the
That exhibit, Mr. Pryor, based on sidebar, we're going to designate Defense Exhibit 7C is what was just published to the jurors and given to the witness.
Now, Ms. Gibb, the date of this email from Lori Vallow to you was dated 7/25 of 2019.
Okay.
Okay. And at that time, you were in the process at about that time, very time, on the way to a mountain retreat camp to teach that in the next few days, right at the time you sent this, correct? Remember that?
No,
You don't remember that?
I don't remember anything about me teaching anybody anything like that.
Okay. So you're denying the fact that you and Ms. Vallow had a conversation and you talked about teaching and shutting off dark spirits or dark portals, right?
Incorrect. She shared that.
Oh, she shared that with you.
No, that text says that she wanted to teach me. It had nothing to do with what I responded to that I can see from that text.
Well, forgive me, but the text says, I'm going to teach right now, teaching about discerning and shutting off dark spirits. So it's your contention then that you're not Phoebe, right?
Well, I gather from that conversation that she was sharing that with me.
Okay. Well, I gather from the conversation that you were sharing that with her. So we have a disagreement, don't we?
Objection, Your Honor, argumentative.
Sustained.
Okay. So your position is you never talked or taught in any camp. Is that right, about dark portals? Is that what you're
That's
testifying to?
correct.
Okay. Okay. Now, you also previously testified that you never discussed dark and light or super dark or different levels of dark and light. Is that right?
I discussed it at times with probably people in the inner circle, but I didn't go around teaching it that I can recall.
I didn't ask about teaching. I said that you had discussions with people about light and dark then, right?
Right.
So that's not a term that's not unfamiliar to you, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So when you say the inner circle, does that include Mike James?
No,
Okay. So you never had a discussion with Mike James about super dark and dark. Is that right?
not to my recollection.
Okay. Would it refresh your recollection that on November 12th of 2019, you contacted Lori Vallow complaining about Mike James and someone named Nancy being super dark? Does that refresh your recollection?
I don't recall that.
Okay. And if I were to show that to you, would that help you refresh your recollection?
It doesn't matter to me. Regardless, I just don't recall it.
Okay. Well, Mr. Bailiff, could you provide this to Ms. Gibb?
So he's contending that she went around calling other people dark, which isn't hard for me to believe because I think a lot of people now go around calling other people dark. I mean, look at the 8 passengers, Ruby Frankie, Jody Hildebrand case. That's what they were doing with the kids. They're being dark. They have dark spirits.
Ma'am, when you're done reading that, would you set that or give that back to the bailiff, please?
Yep. Thesauruses are always great. I don't like repeating either. I don't like being repetitive. I am sometimes, but I don't like doing it. You know what I've been
Okay.
meaning to ask
Give
you,
it back to
Johnny?
the bailiff, please.
I'll ask you in the next.
Mr. Bailiff, if I may, please. So you saw this. Does this refresh your recollection, Miss Gibb?
No,
It doesn't.
I don't recall.
Okay. Well, do I need to show it to you again and ask you?
I can read it and I see what it says. I just don't recall that text.
Okay. So you don't recall talking about Mike James and asking for a favor and mentioning that someone named Nancy is super dark, but obviously there was that conversation, right?
According to that text, but I don't recall that text.
Okay. And talking about being violent and bad language.
Yeah, I saw that.
Okay. You're not denying that this text exists, are you?
No, I just don't recall it.
You just don't recall talking about super dark. So when you gave your testimony that you never really preached or talked about super dark or super light or anything like that, is that still accurate?
I don't recall talking to people outside of the inner circle about that.
Okay, well, that's Mike James. And you just told me Mike James is not in the inner circle.
He's not.
So that's somebody you were talking to Lori about, and it was based on a discussion about light and dark, right?
Right.
So you did talk outside your inner circle about this, didn't you?
Incorrect.
The
Incorrect?
inner circle.
Well, Mike James isn't in your inner circle.
No.
Mike James is unloading on me and says Nancy is super dark. So are you suggesting that, it was just Mike James saying the super dark and you were just listening? Is that what you're saying?
I don't recall how I felt at that time or what he was saying context. I just have no memory of that. I'm sorry.
Okay. And then your lack of memory is
Objection, Your Honor. Argumentative. These have been asked and answered, and this is a narrative.
This last question was not a question. It was argumentative. It's sustained.
Judge, and I think I'm going to move on. Okay.
Sure.
You mentioned about castings,
Right.
and it's your testimony that prior to meeting Lori Vallow, you never engaged in castings. Is that right?
Right.
Okay. But then when you met Lori Vallow, you started the process of engaging in castings.
Correct.
And you mentioned that as part of castings, physical violence to anyone was never part of the solution there, right?
Correct.
The solution was to engage in castings and pray to have evil spirits leave the body of the people you believe are possessed.
Correct.
Death was never in the equation for castings. Is that right?
I guess they eventually said that they would pass on if the evil spirits would leave.
Hi, Crystal.
So is that something that's consistent with your LDS faith?
No.
But you engaged in that conduct, right?
Correct.
Okay. Did anybody force you to engage in that conduct?
No.
Okay. I'm going to switch gears a little bit. We previously talked about you going to Hawaii to visit Lori in 2019. Okay. Did Lori pay for your flight on that trip?
I don't think so. I don't recall.
Don't recall, right? Okay. But Tylee was not there. That would you recall?
Not when I was there.
There were occasions when Lori would pay for people's flights. Do you recall that ever occurring?
I don't know.
Okay. Do you ever have a discussion with Lori about paying for Chad's flight to speak in Arizona?
Doesn't sound familiar.
Okay. I want to go back over the timeline a little bit about the weekend of the 19th through the 23rd. Okay.
Okay.
You arrived in Idaho Falls on the 19th. Is that what you recall?
Yes.
That was a Thursday, right?
Yes.
Okay. Lori picked you up at the airport. Is that correct?
Yes.
Was Alex there as well?
He wasn't in the car. No.
Okay. You also, on that Thursday, in a previous interview with law enforcement, mentioned that you went to a restaurant immediately upon arriving in Idaho Falls on that Thursday.
That's right.
And that restaurant, if I recall, was a Johnny Carino's. Does that ring a bell?
I just know it was an Italian restaurant.
Okay. Okay. At that point, was JJ with you too when you went to Johnny Carino's?
I don't recall seeing him there.
Okay. Do you recall that Lori had hired a babysitter that day?
Yeah, I think so.
Good morning,
Right. And Alex
Lollipop.
was with you because the JJ was with a babysitter, right?
I believe he met us at the restaurant.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Okay.
And after you were at the restaurant, do you recall that the two of you then went to a Walmart?
Mhm. I don't recall.
Okay. It's possible you went to a Walmart afterwards, right?
It's possible.
Okay. And then you, after going to Johnny Carino's and going to the Walmart, it was relatively late that night, correct?
I feel like it was in the afternoon.
Okay. Is that what you recall?
Yes.
Okay. But then is it your testimony that the remainder of the day you and Lori spent time together, you didn't see Chad, correct?
I don't recall if Chad came over or not. I just know I was with her.
Okay. And that was Thursday, we're correct?
Yes.
Okay, so then we move on to Friday. Do you recall going to a place called the Gravity Factory on
It's
Friday?
some jump place.
I think that's
Yeah.
what that was,
Yeah,
right?
I do recall going there.
Talked about that with law enforcement, right?
Yes,
I think you called it like a jump house or something like that.
like that.
Do you remember about what time that you folks went to the jump house on Friday?
Well, I'm not sure it was Friday, but it was daylight outside.
Okay. Well, we know that it wasn't Thursday because we already discussed Thursday, correct?
I can't say if it was or wasn't. It could we could have done it on Thursday.
You could have.
Yeah, I don't recall when we actually went.
Okay. So you recall telling law enforcement in an interview that on Friday you went to the jump house or to the Gravity Factory. Do you recall telling law enforcement?
I don't recall the date I shared with them.
Okay.
Melanie
And you don't
starting
recall
to
what
sound
time you went to the
irritated.
Gravity House or the jump house, right?
Correct.
Okay. Okay. On the Friday morning, do you recall going anywhere Friday morning?
I just know specific things we did. I just can't always recall exactly what day it was.
And then do you recall that after you had spent amount of time before we get there, the jump house, that wasn't for you and Lori, right?
Correct.
That was for JJ?
Correct.
Okay. And you don't recall the number of hours you spent at the jump house, do you?
I would say it was maybe around 2 hours.
Okay. And that was, and my recollection is that was in Idaho Falls, correct?
I don't know where it was.
Oh, you don't remember?
I don't.
Okay. And then after the jump house, you and Lori and JJ oh, by the way, was Alex there too at the jump house with you guys?
I remember he came and went. He brought some pizza, I believe.
Well, you guys went out for pizza, didn't you?
Yes, we did. Yeah.
You didn't bring pizza.
I feel like he brought something in. That's just my memory.
Right.
Yeah.
What happened is you went to the jump house, and then isn't it true you afterwards Alex came by, and then all of you went out to have a bite to eat for dinner at a pizza place, correct?
I don't recall what day it was, but we did go out for pizza one night.
And then after you went out for pizza, you went back to the townhome, correct?
I I don't remember.
Okay, well, you went back because you had to gather your things to go pick up Dave, right?
I didn't have to pick up Dave.
Well, who picked up Dave?
No one.
He drove in?
Yes.
I was under the impression Dave flew in.
No.
Okay. That Dave flew in, that's not correct?
That's not correct.
Okay. And then on Friday evening, the folks in the townhouse that evening were you and Dave,
Correct.
your boyfriend at the time, Lori and Alex,
Yes.
and JJ.
And JJ. And I think Chad was there too.
Oh, how long was Chad there?
I don't recall.
Okay. Is it possible that Chad wasn't there?
It's possible.
Okay. And then do you recall if Alex and your boyfriend at the time were playing Guitar Hero on a video game?
They were playing. I remember watching it. I might have at some point just jumped in a little bit and danced a little bit.
Okay. We don't. That's okay.
Mhm.
But the two of them had spent a considerable amount of time that Friday night playing Guitar Hero, Alex and Dave, correct?
No, I don't believe Dave ever did.
Oh, Dave watched Alex play?
Yes, I guess so.
Okay. And then we go on to Saturday. You got up in the morning and prepared to go to this firm foundation thing, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now, do you remember in one of your text messages to Prosecutor Wood that you mentioned that you were there at the firm foundation for about 10 hours taking pictures? Do you recall talking to Prosecutor Wood about that?
I don't recall talking to him about that.
Is it possible you spoke to him about that?
It's possible.
Okay. So you were at the firm foundation and you said you were there for about 10 hours, correct?
I think I was. I just don't remember.
Okay. And do you recall that it was rather late at night on Saturday when you got done with the firm foundation?
Yes. Yes.
And you didn't see Chad that night either, did you?
I don't recall seeing him.
Okay, right. So then we go on to Sunday. And you and Dave slept in that morning, correct? Recall that?
I do not recall that.
Okay. Anyway, you woke up late, apparently, and Lori.
Objection, Your Honor, misstates the prior testimony in counsel's, it's a narrative.
Sustain.
Is it possible you slept in till late Sunday morning?
No,
It's not possible?
I don't sleep in.
Okay, thank you.
Well, that was very important to get. I don't sleep in. Now we know that Melanie does not sleep in.
Okay. And then, do you recall that Lori gave you a haircut that Sunday?
Yes.
Okay, and how long did that take?
A few hours because she colored my hair too.
Okay, so that was Sunday morning, correct?
I think so.
Okay, and do you recall about what time that was?
Good morning, hippie.
I don't.
Okay. Sometime in the morning, right?
Correct.
Okay. And then you folks went to have lunch that after she cut your hair, correct?
No, I don't remember that at all.
Okay. Did you stay in the townhouse and bring lunch in?
I don't remember how the food was. I don't remember her having a lot of food. She might have made something. I don't remember.
Okay, but at that point, you hadn't seen Chad Daybell Sunday morning, correct?
No, I saw him Sunday morning.
You did? When was that?
shortly after we went to this field behind a church building. So sometime in the morning, I felt like it was in the morning. Could have been late morning, but it was sometime.
Do you recall discussing with Lori that after Chad gets out of church Sunday afternoon, we'll go out and look at a piece of property? Do you recall having that conversation with Lori?
I don't recall, but it's possible.
Okay, so is it possible you're just confused about the facts and the time to go visit the land was really early to late afternoon on Sunday?
I felt like her seeing a piece of land that I talked about first, and then the going to see that land for sale was second. That's just my memory.
Oh, so you went to see a piece of land with Lori first?
Well, I wouldn't consider it was just this empty field that was behind a church, but it wasn't for any purpose of being purchased.
So you were traveling to the piece of property that you were going to go look with Alex and David, but you were traveling with Lori at that point, correct?
Objection, Your Honor. Misstates the testimony. It's a narrative. I'd move to strike.
It was supposed to
Overruled.
be a tent
You were
city.
traveling with Lori to go look at the piece of property with the real estate person, correct?
No.
Who were you traveling with?
I don't know who I was traveling with. I think maybe Dave and I were in the truck and we drove over there. I don't remember.
You don't remember. So it's possible that you were traveling with Lori as well, right?
No.
Okay. So you remember you weren't with Lori.
Yeah, I remember.
Okay. But you had mentioned that you and Lori went to see a piece of parcel first.
Yes. Mhm.
Okay. And then subsequent to that, you went to look at another piece of property, correct?
Correct.
And then Chad was meeting you at that second piece of parcel, correct?
Correct.
And then do you recall you told in an interview to law enforcement that Chad was still in his church clothes at that point?
Could be.
Okay. Well, do you remember that or not?
I don't remember the conversation.
Okay. So it's possible that you told law enforcement that Chad was in his church clothes in the afternoon when he went out to see the property, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So you did see Chad at the property at that point, correct?
Correct.
And that's the one we're really sure about, right?
I'm sure about both of them, but yes, he was at that one.
You're sure? Which is the other one that you're so sure about?
The one that we just talked about, the prior one,
Prior one about what?
the parcel that we went to first.
Okay. Oh, Chad was there too?
Uh-huh.
Okay. And then afterwards, you went back to the townhome, correct?
I think so, but I don't recall for sure.
Okay. And Chad didn't go with you back to the townhome, did he?
I don't think so.
Okay. And then at that point, you were getting prepared for your podcast that you were going to do that night, right?
We didn't prepare for that till the evening.
Okay. And again, on a Sunday evening, Chad wasn't there for the podcast, correct?
Correct.
And then just to clarify again, after you did the podcast, that was late in the, well, it could have been as late as Saturday or Monday morning, but it was after midnight sometime, right?
I'm not sure if it was after midnight. I just know it was around that time.
Okay. And then and then we'll move on to Monday. And Monday, you departed
Mhm.
and left to go back home. Is that correct?
No.
What did you do on Monday?
Dave and I drove to Pocatello to see his son.
Okay. And you left at about 9:30.
That sounds about right.
Isn't it true that you and Alex and Dave drove by Chad's property Monday morning?
No.
Okay. Judge, I have nothing else. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Pryor.
Interesting.
Ms. Blake, you can conduct redirect if you'd like.
No, that's already up there. But it has to be.
Does anyone feel like
It's going to be put in. Yeah. I like it. That's right.
Pryor got any of what he wanted accomplished with this witness?
find it.
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, I feel like his line of questioning is usually about Lori. Wasn't it Lori that was doing this and not Chad? Wasn't it Lori that was doing this and not Chad? And her answers are pretty solidly.
Right, sorry, Ms. Blake, we are labeling the one that was specifically referenced as 7C and putting a mark on that. I know it's a subpart of a generally admitted exhibit, but 7C is marked for the record.
Thank you, Your Honor. I just wanted to wait.
Hello, Sharon.
Yes, we'll get that straightened out. Thank you.
Would you like me to proceed?
Yes, go ahead.
Ms. Gibb, we've asked you a lot of stuff from the years of 2018, 2019. Have you done your best to recall the facts?
Yes.
With regard to Lori, we talked about your relationship with her. And at times, I think you indicated you had daily contact,
Right.
and at times it was more sporadic.
Correct.
But this contact with her spanned over a period of time, correct?
Yes.
You were asked if you thought Chad believed that he could see visions. And I think you said yes, that was your understanding.
Yes.
Did Chad ever indicate to you that he had visions?
Well, he shared them publicly, so yes.
So Chad shared that he did have visions.
Yes.
You were asked yesterday about the term vibration.
Yes.
Did Chad and Lori ever use the term vibration?
Yes.
How did they use it?
They used it in a way to express their what they thought their knowledge was about being translated.
And when we talk about that, did your level in translation equate with the vibration number?
Yes.
What did they teach regarding that?
So the higher the number, the closer to the body being in a translation state.
And what did they talk about in relation to a translated state?
Your body would be changed in a way that you wouldn't have to eat or, I don't know, drink, but I don't know, your body's just more, I guess, stronger, powerful.
And you wouldn't need some of the things that, generally speaking, mortals or bodies need to survive. Is that fair?
Yeah. Yeah.
Same here, Jamie Lee.
You were also asked some about light and dark, and you were asked about energy work as well. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Is it fair to say that some people may have a
Judge,
glow
I'm
about
going to
them?
object. It's leading.
Sustain.
Your Honor, and I think, if I may respond.
Well, you can ask another question, but it is redirect, not recross. So that was the leading question.
I guess that's what I wanted to be heard on.
Go ahead.
I think there was some agreement to allow defense to go outside the scope of direct, and I do think questions were asked that opened this avenue.
Judge, could we approach?
That's not necessary. I'll make a ruling. There was some discussion, and to the extent that there was additional cross outside the scope of direct, then it would be appropriate for leading on your redirect, Ms. Blake, on those topics. So I'll, after reconsideration, overrule that objection because it was a topic essentially brought up anew in cross. So I will allow some leading, Ms. Blake. So go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. Would it be fair to say that some people may have a glow about them?
Yes.
And is that a little bit different than the light and dark that Chad and Lori taught?
I think so.
You were asked about your communication with the prosecutors.
Yes.
And you acknowledge you had communication with the prosecutors.
That's right.
Did anything about that communication alter your memory of the events?
I'm not sure what you're saying.
Sorry, did it change what you recall from the events with Chad and Lori, your communication with the prosecutors?
Well, no.
Did you ever personally observe Lori and Chad on the phone together?
Yes.
And were you with Lori when those conversations would happen?
Yes.
Were you ever able to overhear some of the conversations?
Just a little bit.
After Lori would get off the phone with Chad, would she ever tell you what they talked about?
Yes.
And when she'd tell you what they talked about, would she share with you things Chad taught or told her?
Yes.
And you were asked about in these whether or not Chad had ever indicated to you that he intended to physically harm Tammy. And I think you said he'd never indicated that.
That's right.
And you also said he never indicated a specific intention to harm Lori's kids. Is that correct?
Yes.
Who was it that would label someone dark or a zombie again?
Chad.
And and once someone was labeled a zombie or dark, what was going to happen to their body? As Chad and Lori taught it.
If they could cast the evil spirit out, the body would naturally die.
So if someone was dark or a zombie, they were going to die.
Yes. Well, maybe. I mean, not everybody. They knew.
But that was the teaching. If the casting was successful, the body would die.
Right. Right.
And JJ was labeled dark or a zombie.
Yes.
Tammy was labeled dark or a zombie.
Yes.
Charles was labeled dark or a zombie.
Yes.
And Tylee was labeled dark or a zombie.
Yes.
You were asked about that phone call, the recording from December 8th of 2019.
Yes.
And to be clear, did law enforcement ask you to record that?
Never.
Do you recall hearing Chad on there telling you that you may be in danger?
Yes.
As Lori talked, did Chad ever jump in and correct her? That you recall?
Say that again.
Did Chad ever jump in to correct Lori when you were on that call?
I don't recall that.
And Chad was there with her for the call. We could hear him, correct?
Correct.
And Lori tells you JJ's okay.
Correct.
You were also asked about when Chad called you around Thanksgiving. Do you
Yes.
recall that call in 2019?
Yes.
And do you recall what Chad told you or asked you to do at that time?
He asked me not to pick up the phone when the police would call.
Do you recall asking him if JJ was with Kay?
Yes.
And what was Chad's response?
No. The answer was no.
So Chad knew he wasn't with Kay.
Yes.
When that phone call was placed to you by Chad, did you know JJ was missing at that time?
I guess no, I didn't.
So when Chad first tells you not to talk to the police, you actually don't know JJ's been reported as missing.
Correct. Yeah.
I have no further questions.
Judge, I have just a couple of items on recross.
Okay, that's fine, Mr. Pryor. I'll ask some recross.
And Your Honor, may we approach?
Yes.
Okay, that's okay. Okay, okay, right? Okay, right? Okay, right? Right? Okay, okay, okay.
Your Honor, I would like to sidebar here. Is this, Your Honor, sidebar?
There's no jury here.
Okay, well, that's
so
me.
You do a sidebar to keep a jury from hearing things, but there's no jury here. So
Okay, then
if you have an objection, make an objection.
Oh, court. Oh, court. You create such funny situations sometimes. Absolutely, Jamie Lee. I mean, there's no question. I mean, clearly sorry, Sharon. Clearly, these children were a means to a financial end for these people, right? But of course, that is so disgusting. Hello, Destination. That is so disgusting that they could probably hardly even admit that to themselves. So they have to come up with this grand,
All right, Mr. Pryor, we discussed the scope of recross. Please keep it on those topics and you can continue.
a grand biblical reason.
With the microphone, Mr. Pryor, please.
Hey, Judge. Ms. Gibb, you talked about the fact that you participated in castings, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And as part of your participation in castings, you knew the intent of what a casting was used for was to rid the body of evil spirits, correct?
Correct.
But then you just testified with the prosecuting attorney that you also knew that at successful completion of the casting, the human body would die. So you knew that when you were doing this castings, that apparently you were ending the life of a human body. Isn't that correct?
I had no idea what really the result would be.
Oh,
That was
okay.
the theory.
Okay. But you just said that the purpose of castings was to, when the prosecutor asked you about that it would end the life of a human body, correct?
Objection, Your Honor, misstates the testimony, misstates the prior question from the state.
Sustain. All right, that concludes the recross then. That will conclude the testimony of Ms. Gibb. I believe she's under subpoena from the defense also, but I don't know that there's nothing covered that where I allowed the extended scope of cross. Do you intend to recall her, Mr. Pryor?
Judge, I want to keep her under subpoena at this point because if other issues come up and I need Ms. Gibb to come back, I spoke with the prosecutor about how I can communicate with Ms. Gibb if that need arises. But at this point, I want to keep her under subpoena. I would ask the court to do an admonishment about not allowing her to view anything or talk to anybody about the case. But at this point, the final decision has not been made. And I explained that to the prosecutor, but in the event something comes up that I need to revisit that, I need to have that opportunity.
Very well. Ms. Gibb, that concludes your testimony for now. You may be recalled. Because you may be recalled and are under subpoena from the defense, I'll request and admonish you, not request, but you're admonished not to watch further trial proceedings that may be available on the live stream or to follow the case in any way until such time as you're released from the subpoena. Okay. All right.
Judge, could I also inquire that Ms. Gibb be advised about discussing her testimony or testimony with anybody else?
That's part of the admonishment. So
Thank you, Judge.
that will conclude the testimony of Ms. Gibb. We're going to take a mid-morning recess and discuss scheduling as well as take up one issue outside the presence of the jurors. So at this time, we will break for our mid-morning recess and rise for the jurors, and I'll have counsel stay while we address that issue.
All rise.
Okay, we're going to stick around to see them address this issue because these issues have started to become very interesting and you don't want to miss them, because I missed a hearing at the end of the day yesterday that would have been surprisingly interesting to watch. But when you hear a defense attorney, oh, look at them standing close to each other, getting their reaction.
All right, thank you. Please be seated.
When you hear a defense attorney
You can go ahead and sit down.
keeping witnesses on, he hadn't dismissed Melanie either yet. When a defense attorney keeps keeping witnesses on the list, oh, and she's also wearing salmon again.
All right, Ms. Blake, I understand the state was interested in putting an objection on the record relating to the manner in which recross is being permitted.
Oh.
Yes, Your Honor. We had asked to approach in a sidebar about that. At this juncture, Mr. Pryor has been allowed to do a recross on almost every one of the state's witnesses, and I think it's extending beyond any new matters that may come up. So we're just objecting to the generality of him getting to recross, and would request that it be limited to only if a new issue arises, so that we don't end up in a situation where then the state asks to do another redirect and go down that.
And if I could respond, Judge Mead.
You may.
And quite frankly, Judge, it's not the prosecutor's prerogative, or is it their decision to decide when I get a recross? That's the judge's decision to make. So I don't know where Ms. Gibbs thinks she has the authority or the ability to say when.
Ms. Blake.
Miss Blake is what I said, Judge, I think. I did say Miss Blake, did I not?
Said Ms. Gibbs.
Miss Gibbs. I apologize.
Oh my
Go
God.
ahead.
Miss Blake has the ability to dictate when this court makes its own independent decision when I'm permitted to have recross.
All right, well, evidentiary rulings and the way witnesses are examined are subject to rules as well as the court's discretion. Certainly the state can lodge an objection, and I'll pay attention to that. There is limitations on what is supposed to be allowed in the scope of redirect or recross. Part of the reason the court has been pretty liberal in allowing that is sort of I understood, standing agreement between the parties that with certain witnesses, instead of calling them twice, once in the defense or in the state's case, again in the defense case, for efficiency purposes, getting them on the stand once. I permitted extensive, on some witnesses, scope of cross beyond direct. If we are not going outside the scope as part of that agreement, then I would agree that it's not proper to allow recross every time. So I'll just watch for the topics that come up. And if we extend on cross beyond the scope and that's allowed, then that's where I think there's a second opportunity. So both sides essentially get a right to direct and cross a witness. So I'll just take that under advisement for future rulings. Any questions on that ruling, Ms. Blake?
Thank you, Your Honor. And the state does recognize it's clearly within the court's discretion. If we do have concerns in the future about a request for recross, would the court just like us to approach and then discuss that?
I just don't think those are prejudicial for the jurors, and approaching slows things down. So
So just make the objection?
Just make an objection, I think, unless it's related to some specific topic that may prejudice the jurors. Let's just move it along with.
And the state does agree that recross may absolutely be appropriate. It just seems that it is at times just rehashing the same stuff.
Very well. It'll be under advisement for future rulings. We'll take our rest of our recess at this time, and I do want to just briefly discuss the remaining schedule for today with council right now on a sidebar, and then we'll take our break.
All rise.
Don't you love, how Pryor's like, she doesn't get to tell me what.
Witness the lies.
I didn't lie to you on that polygraph, I promise.
All right, I'm going to show you this hearing that took place yesterday. But while I do, I agree. I was noticing that oops. Pryor was getting to recross all the time, and I don't necessarily follow whether the cross-examination is in line or the recross is in line with the cross-examination and the redirect or whatever, but he does get up every time. And what that says to me is that he's just grasping. Remember, I was showing you this during some previous trials we were watching here. I think I still have it here. Yeah. This is what it looks like when some attorneys get up there. They're like just sitting there with their chopsticks, hoping that something comes into their view that they can, and then, they may or may not be able to grab it. And that's, the way they ask it. And that's how it feels when they're asking questions of of some of the witnesses, just meandering around the questions, trying to find that one question that's going to elicit some sort of, admission of some hole that they could climb through to get to a defense. It's just crazy. All right. So for those of you who are not aware, there was a hearing after court was over yesterday and they gavelled out for the jury. There was a hearing yesterday for this man who filed a last minute emergency motion to pause the trial. And Judge Boyce held this hearing for this motion at the afternoon, yesterday afternoon. And he was not happy. And ostensibly it was, I think this lawyer came in prepared to argue the motion, but Judge Boyce is like, no. You're an attorney and you filed a faulty motion. You are being sanctioned. And that's how it ended up. So let's check this out.
On March
Yeah, this is it.
29th, that would have been on March.
So the lawyer, they're on the bottom there. Judge is on the right, and then, top right, you got Chad and Pryor, and then you got this guy who is an attorney and his attorney who's representing him.
31st. That was Easter Sunday before we were going to start with our voir dire the following Monday. On Easter Sunday,
Listen to, you can even tell from Judge Boyce's voice immediately that he's going in a direction of, I'm done with this.
Staff attorney who had an opportunity finally to travel home and spend Easter with her family after a very long week, was interrupted out of her church services and contacted the court that we had an emergency happening in our case that was going. And the emergency was, we had a motion to continue the trial. And I wasn't sure who was asking to have the trial continued, why the trial would be continued, but this created a tremendous amount of quick response required by the court, by staff, by clerks, by the prosecutors, by the defense, all occurring again on one of the few days we had a break as we were grinding through jury selection on Easter Sunday. The pleading the court received is entitled Motion to Intervene and to Continue the Trial in These Proceedings. filed by Mr. Ratliff on his official office pleading letterhead, signed by Mr. Ratliff as the attorney for the defendant, both on the signature line and on the caption. I'll note the pleading incorrectly spells the word motion. It incorrectly spells the word continue. It incorrectly spells the word proceedings in its caption. And when I reviewed this, I'm going to tell you, Mr. Ratliff, I was angry then, and I think I'm angrier now.
This cracked me up when the judge was going through what specifically was missed in this lawyer's motion. And it just, of course, we have our defamation case, right? Remember how I was sued for defamation of character? But this was a pro se litigant who had sued me for defamation of character. So she wouldn't have gotten reamed out by the judge about this because she's pro se. This is a lawyer who was filing these motions. Yeah, he said it was a template.
About what you did. However, in light of allowing you some due process, I looked through a correct way to handle this, and I considered Rule 11. I'll note you've retained an attorney, Mr. Bartlett, and I have reviewed a lengthy response brief along with declarations submitted on your behalf. And procedurally, where we are, first of all, the order to show cause for me is for you to explain, Mr. Ratliff, to personally explain to me how your pleading complies with Rule 11 of the Rules of Civil Procedure.
So just as a fun fact, are you trying to sidebar me? You need a sidebar, Patricia? Just as a fun fact, oh shoot, sorry. Let me go back and hear what he just said because I forgot what I was going to tell you.
For you to explain, Mr. Ratliff, to personally explain to me how your pleading complies with Rule 11 of the Rules of Civil Procedure. Typically, when someone shows up with an attorney, their attorney gets to argue for them. However, under certain circumstances, I don't know that the right to counsel attaches, and in particular, under a Rule 11 request, I don't believe it does. I'll note the Rule 11 is a rule of civil procedure, which typically would not apply in a criminal filing. However, there are rules under the criminal rules that states we do follow civil rules when there's no corresponding rule. And in particular, criminal rules 47 and 49 indicate that filings of motions in criminal cases are to be filed in the same way and manner, and using the word manner, in which pleadings have to be filed in civil cases. Rule 11 governs licensed attorneys and the representations they make. There's been some indication of your counsel that perhaps Rule 11 doesn't apply. I believe Rule 11 does apply. I don't believe lawyers can file whatever they want in a criminal case without being subject to the representations under Rule 11, where they certify certain things and making those filings as officers of the court. To argue otherwise would say any lawyer could file anything they want in a criminal case and not be subject to any kind of sanction under Rule 11. And I believe Rule 11 permits exactly that, for me to consider it. Rule 11 under Part C3 allows the court to conduct an inquiry on its own initiative. And the court has done this, not at the request of the parties, but at my own request, because I do have questions for Mr. Ratliff. And I'll note procedurally, while I appreciate the time and research Mr. Bartlett has put into the case, we don't have a party in this case appearing before me. Mr. Ratliff, you are not the defendant. You are not the state. You are not a prosecutor. You are not the defense attorney. You are an attorney
with a license that filed something asking me to stop this trial when I don't think you had any legal standing to do that. And I'm going to give you personally an opportunity to make any explanation you want as to some of my questions. I am not going to turn this into an adjunct litigation under the auspices of this capital murder case, because quite frankly, you don't represent the defendant here. You don't represent the state. You're not a party. And I'm not going to let this devolve into a whole separate procedural mess in this case and create a record of some side issue that has nothing to do with the charges the state is currently putting evidence on for. So now that I've had my say about how we got here and why we are here, Mr. Ratliff, I have questions for you under Rule 11. And if you'd like to answer those questions personally, I will ask you some questions. If you don't want to answer those questions under the advice of counsel, I'll understand that as well. And I don't know that I even need any input from the parties. So, Mr. Ratliff, are you going to answer the court's questions as it relates to Rule 11?
So you can't hear him. And yes, I have tried to turn on closed captions.
Otherwise, I think really this process, I think the process will be violent. So the rules regarding consent.
I'm not in contempt. I'm not in contempt, Mr. Bartlett. Well,
It didn't know what the basis was, whether it should cost score. Was he showing cause that we ought to be allowed in the meeting? Was he showing cause whether or not he complied with Rule 11? Was he showing, but we didn't know. So we only learned 2 evenings ago, it was late on the 16th, that I was told that we got Rule 11 on the court.
oh, was that inconvenient for you? Was that, I'm asking you a direct question. Was that inconvenient for you?
Your Honor, it was only that I didn't have the amount of notes necessary. It's not that.
So he was saying, was that an inconvenient for you? Because it does sound like Charlie Brown's teacher. Was that inconvenient for you? Because the lawyer was complaining about the lack of time to prepare for the hearing. I'm sorry, was that inconvenient for you, man? Righteousness. It bums that you can't hear, though. It bums me out.
Mr. Bartlett, hold on. I indicated I wasn't going to have you argue this motion. I allowed you to start making it, and you are doing precisely that. I've thought this through. I'm in Rule 11 here. I'm in a rule that governs lawyers and their pleadings. When lawyers sign off on pleadings, lawyers are responsible for their pleadings. Lawyers, unless they're facing a sanction of jail under contempt, do not necessarily have the opportunity to have counsel represent them on a Rule 11. If you file a frivolous civil complaint and a judge says, I'm going to award fees because it was frivolous, you don't get to have another lawyer from another firm jump in between you and the judge and the complaint you filed, because you have the responsibility as a licensed attorney to put your name on pleadings and stand behind your signature under those rules, under Rule 11 and what you certify, and you answer those, in my opinion.
So to answer a couple of your questions, no, they didn't alter his voice on purpose. They just didn't have his microphone on, like Tidy Girl says. And no, they never ended up finding out why he filed the motion, because they never heard the arguments for the motion because it was he was sanctioned for filing the motion because it was a faulty motion. So
And I'm the judge here. This is how you address Rule 11. So with all due respect, Mr. Bartlett, I appreciate you attempting to and wanting to represent your client. Again, you can do that. You've talked to him before. You can talk to him after. But the questions I have on Rule 11 relate directly to a pleading that Mr. Ratliff filed as licensed attorney in this case. And I have a right to ask him about his pleading that he filed. And so if you want to take a moment to consult with him, you can do that, but I'm not going to have you argue the merits of this. That will be up to you or Mr. Ratliff.
Ask that I have an opportunity to speak with him. So thank you so much for that.
Okay, I'll take the time you need. I don't want to spend much more time this afternoon. We're in the middle of this trial. We've had evidence today. We're going to have evidence tomorrow. Make it quick and then let me know what your client wants to do.
Yes, sir.
All right, Mr. Ratliff, I have some questions about your pleading. Are you willing to answer those?
Sure am.
All right. The pleading I'm looking at, it's not been entered in the case yet. And the pleading, let me just a second. All right. You did in fact file this electronically in CR. Well, that's wrong too, the case number, but this is case CR 22-21-16-23, the state of Idaho versus Chad Guy Daybell. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right. I'll note the case number is wrong as well. You got it CR 12-21.
the case number's wrong
The first
too.
part I want to know under Rule 11, which requires you to make representations to the court. You hold yourself out as and title yourself attorney for the defendant. Why do you say that?
Judge, as you know, this is a template form, and I simply forgot to take that off of there. That was Scrivener's error on my behalf.
Okay, Scrivener's error. On the,
If you notice in the body of
Tiggy girl, his answers are very Rocket Man like.
the motion,
It wasn't my fault. It was the template's fault.
Judge, I say without permission of the defendant or his trial counsel.
all right, let's look at your signature on page 3. You signed Terry S. Ratliff of the firm, attorney for the defendant on page 3, don't you?
Again, because it was in my template.
All right, on page 2, again, a signature, Terry S. Ratliff of the firm, attorney for the defendant, correct?
I don't have page 3, Joe.
And by the way, when he says it's a template, it's not a template. It's his own template. It's his own template. It's not some other template that he's filling out for the court. Sorry.
I just have a page 1 or 2.
The bottom of the certificate of service is one signature, another at the bottom of the contents of the pleading.
If it's there, Judge, it's there because it's a template form and I didn't strike it.
Okay, so 3 times you called yourself the attorney for the defendant. So who are you the attorney for?
Me.
So Terry S. Ratliff, attorney for Terry S. Ratliff in this case.
I should have signed citizen.
Citizen?
Yes.
Why are you
Avoid-
referencing your bar number if you're just citizen?
Again, it's the form, Judge. It's a reference to the form. I am not Mr. Daybell's attorney, never was.
You put this on a pleading. If you look at the top left, you've got your name, your Idaho State bar number, your Ratliff Law offices, and attorney for defendant. You're telling me you mistakenly just wanted to file something as a citizen and not as a lawyer?
I was looking for immediate relief because of the concerns I had about the case, Your Honor.
And why were you doing that on a Friday night at almost midnight? What,
Because-
you've known about this case for a long time, according to your own content here, right?
That's correct.
So why are you doing it then?
Because I thought I needed to do something to slow it down.
Trial scheduled for how many years?
Why?
And you wanted to slow it down the day before trial started?
I'd also gotten calls from Mr. Pryor, Judge, for help.
That might be fine, but did he ever retain you on the case, or did you ever enter an appearance for the defendant?
I did not.
All
Prior's
right,
like,
and you do
what?
state in here you're filing this pleading without the permission of the defendant or his counsel, correct?
That's correct.
You also state in here and call yourself an intervener. What basis do you have to intervene?
Based on my,
In the brief?
it's set out in our brief, Judge, as to the basis for why I wanted to intervene.
Hmm.
In the motion, I quote you the relief I wanted. I give you the grounds on page 1 as to why I wanted that relief and why I thought it was necessary.
Okay, and you're going to intervene now, not as Terry Ratliff lawyer, Terry Ratliff citizen at large?
I think it's semantics.
Citizen at large.
Oh, boy, let me stop you there. It's absolutely not. A bar licensed attorney filing something with their bar number to the court is completely different than a citizen. That is not semantics. This is
Okay.
what brings you within the auspices of Rule 11.
I understand. I said perhaps I should have signed it as a citizen, but I didn't.
All right. In your intent
You're
to
supposed
intervene,
to
whether
know
it's as a
this, sir.
citizen or an attorney, let me read you a couple of case quotes. Quote, "The Idaho Rules of Criminal Procedure do not provide a process for intervention. The inability of non-parties to intervene in a criminal case recognizes that the considerations underlying intervention in civil cases are not applicable to criminal proceedings." That's People versus Ham, and that's State versus Johnson, 167 Idaho 454. And we've also got another Idaho case citing, quote, "Petitioners are correct that Idaho's rules of criminal procedure do not provide a specific mechanism for third parties to intervene in a criminal case."
Jamie, he actually, Pryor actually said he talked to several death penalty qualified lawyers. And apparently this lawyer here, Mr. Ratcliffe, is a death penalty qualified lawyer. So it's quite possible that Pryor talked to this guy. The guy says that Pryor didn't retain him. Maybe there was some sort of, misunderstanding about the agreements. But that's why, especially in the legal realm, misunderstandings are hard to have because everything's in writing, everything's contractual, everything has a rule, everything. You have bar rules that you have to live by. You have court procedure rules. You have to enter appearances. This is it is very Rocket Man-esque, very much. It's just so what it strikes me as is that this guy wanted to get his name out there. I mean, this is what it really strikes me as. This guy wanted to get his name out there. Pryor had probably contacted him. He thought, oh, well, since I was contacted, and I think that this case really does need a death penalty qualified lawyer, I'm going to jump in and throw my weight in, and I'm going to put my name out there, and I'm going to file this sloppy motion. And if I get in trouble for it, I'll just ask for permission later, but at least I got my name out there. That's how I see it, but he may have a better explanation.
So again, I think there's settled case law that prohibits intervention in a criminal case. And I'd like to know what authority you have that says you have a right to intervene either as an attorney or a citizen in this case.
As outlined in our brief, Judge, sorry about that. As outlined in our brief, we have given the court several cases where the Idaho appellate courts have allowed people to intervene in cases in a criminal matter, even though they're not parties. That's my basis.
So you intervene, and then we've got two parties here. We've got the state, we've got Chad Daybell, and you're going to float around and be what if you intervene in this case? What are you going to be?
I'm not going to be floating around this case, Judge, because you haven't granted my motion.
Well, assuming you got to intervene, you assumed in your motion you did intervene because you called yourself the intervener once you got going in your motion. What were you going to be at that point?
Staring him down.
I was hoping to have a hearing in front of you before the trial started.
Okay. And you said you were going to be the lawyer for the defendant or already were the lawyer for the defendant. Is that
Not. I explained to you just a few minutes ago that that was a mistake.
explain to me all of the misspellings and typographical errors in your late night filing.
I was nervous and it was late at night. I didn't take this lightly.
You didn't take it lightly, but
And I may have taken a few shots of Maker's Mark.
you used the wrong form. You misrepresented if you were an attorney or a citizen, and you signed 3 times as attorney for defendant. And that's your explanation?
Yes.
All right. Mr. Ratliff, I find based on your responses, you have violated Idaho's Rule 11 under the Rules of Civil Procedure, which I find are incorporated through Idaho Criminal Rule 47 and 49. The court would note that in the rules under C1, it's mandatory. It says the court must impose an appropriate sanction on an attorney, law firm, or party that violated the rule. And similar to what would happen in a civil case with a frivolous type filing, which this was, this cost time, this cost effort, this cost real loss for the attorneys, for the court. I'm going to instruct counsel for both the state and the defense if they could itemize the time they have spent both in today's hearing, in preparing for the hearing, as well as in dealing with this pleading from the time it was filed on Friday night, the 29th, whatever time you've put into that. I'm going to direct Mr. Ratliff that you pay reasonable attorney fees incurred for the time Mr. Pryor spent at his typical hourly rate, for the state's attorneys and whatever rate they are entitled to charge as public prosecutors. And the court will likewise itemize some billing time incurred in this. And the sanction the court's going to order is the payment of those attorney fees. The court will provide time for counsel to submit those. I'll review those for reasonableness before I make an order, and pursuant to the rule which requires a written order under Rule C6.
Don't
Rule
worry,
11,
it ends on a
the court
bang.
will describe in that order the conduct and the basis for the sanction, and you're going to pay for those fees. Do you understand that, Mr. Ratliff?
That's fine, Judge.
Thank you
Very
for
well.
joining,
That'll be
Sharon.
Your Honor, if I may, I'm going to request findings of facts and conclusions of law. As this court is aware, we submitted briefing that addressed many of the issues you addressed to Mr. Ratliff in great detail, giving multiple basis for his right to intervene. The judge, you have not addressed those arguments, and so I'm going to ask for findings of fact and conclusions of law.
All right. Well, Mr. Bartliff, you can ask. I'm not inclined to do that because, again, I've got a lawyer in front of me that submitted a pleading, and the lawyer is responsible for the pleading. I'm not necessarily allowing any further input on behalf of counsel for the lawyer that filed the pleading. I don't think it's proper because I'm not imposing any kind of jail time or sanction similar to Rule 75 of the civil rules, which would implicate on a contempt proceeding the right to counsel. So I'm going to stand by my ruling that I made and ask the attorneys to submit those. That concludes the matter for this afternoon.
Judge, if I may. I'm
You
sorry,
may-
Judge, I am
You may
not.
not. I'm done. I'm done with this issue, and I'm done wasting time on this issue in the middle of a capital case. We're done. We're in recess, period.
You may not. You're done.
Now, Prince
Oh,
Harry is
sorry, hold
facing
on.
a £1 million.
But there's also footage of
All right,
him
good afternoon,
walking
we're on the
out.
record.
Sorry, hold on. There's also footage of him walking out. Ooh. Now, there's also Nate Eaton also described the showdown that happened in the hallway yesterday, and I want to show you that as well, show you his description. I think it's at this point right about here. Hold on.
I don't want to say outlandish. They're pretty far out there. So you'd think you'd remember some, but maybe to Melanie and Lori and Charles, Alex and Chad, this was everyday stuff. So
I don't know where that
how
came from,
could you
Johnny.
remember who was at one particular meeting versus the other? I want you to think for a minute about the first time. Maybe tonight is the first time you're hearing this about castings and light and
talking
dark
about
and
castings.
zombies. I know many of you are new.
I want to get to a different point. Sorry. Hold on. Let me see. I think it was here.
Can object and say it was out of the scope. Sometimes it's very broad and it's all over the place. Just sometimes it's, they'll object and say it's beyond the scope. So Pryor was obviously trying to serve her with the subpoena, one would imagine, to be his witness so that he could call her back.
Oh, they're back in
and
court.
testify on
What I was showing you there was he was describing what happened in the hallway yesterday, but we'll go back to that. We're now back in court. Let's see who the next witness is.
All right, let's go ahead and have the jurors return, please.
Sure.
Yep, I got it paused right in that place, Lollipop Guild. Those royals and their shenanigans, I actually don't keep up with it. I understand why people do. I'm interested in them. I just don't keep up with the day to day to day to day to day. So we're waiting for them to call the next witness. Who will it be?
All rise, please. Present and accounted for.
Thank you. Please be seated. All right, we're back from the mid-morning break. We're going to go ahead and continue with evidence this morning on the state's case in chief. I believe there's another witness the state's prepared to call. Is that correct?
That is correct, Your Honor. The state will call Doug Hart.
Very well. You can call your witness.
solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help you God.
I do.
I'm not sure, Jamie Lee. I haven't heard I didn't hear them say the name, but we will figure it out soon.
You're sitting close enough and speak directly into the mic, please. Okay, you got fresh water and.
All right, Mr. Hart, do you go by agent or officer or some other title you prefer?
Agent Hart is fine. It's former, but whatever works.
Okay, well, we'll just call you Agent Hart then.
Agent Hart.
Before we get started with your testimony, now that you've been placed under oath, I just want to ask you, because the proceedings are being live streamed and available for public access, have you reviewed or watched or any of the trial testimony in this case since it began?
No, I have not, Your Honor.
All right. And have you discussed with anyone else their testimony that has testified in the case?
No, I have not.
Okay. Thank you for that affirmation. Ms. Blake, you can inquire on direct.
Thank you, Your Honor. Would you please spell your name for the record?
Douglas Hart, H-A-R-T.
Where are you currently employed?
I am currently the Chief Deputy at the Canyon County Sheriff's Office
How long have you been employed with them?
since September of 2022.
What did you do prior to taking that position?
Prior to that position, I was a special agent for the Federal Bureau of Investigation for approximately 27 years.
Did you hold various assignments or have specific roles you played within the special agent?
Yes, I did.
And what were some of those?
My first assignment was to the Honolulu, Hawaii field office, where I spent 5.5 years on the organized crime drug squad, conducting complex multi-subject investigations. My second assignment was to the Lewiston, Idaho resident agency, where I spent 7 years working primarily violent crime and persons crimes on the Nez Perce Indian Reservation. My third assignment was to be the supervisor of the Treasure Valley Metro Violent Crime Task Force, which is a local task force headed by the FBI to investigate gangs and violent crimes. And my final assignment, my last 7 years in the FBI, I was the supervisor for the southern 34 counties in Idaho for all criminal programs. And it was in that capacity that I became involved in this investigation.
And you just mentioned becoming involved in this investigation. Can you tell me a little bit about how the FBI ended up involved in this case?
Certainly. This case was brought to our attention in November, towards the end of November of 2019. And because it involved 2 missing children, that is something that the FBI has a specific expertise in. And it's something that we work very closely and cooperatively with our state and city and county partners in investigations involving missing children.
And when you became involved, or when the FBI became involved, is it fair to say that it became a joint investigation?
Yes.
Do you recall which agencies were involved?
Yes. We were initially contacted by the Rexburg Police Department and the Fremont County Sheriff's Department, or Sheriff's Office, excuse me. And then subsequently, for a brief period of time, the State of Idaho Attorney General's Office, and I think and Social Security and a few other entities had smaller parts of the investigation that they worked on.
And as part of your involvement in this investigation, did you take on specific tasks?
I did.
What were some of those?
First and foremost, I was the FBI supervisor in this case, which meant that I was the reviewer and approver of most of the FBI work product that went into our case file. And then I also had an investigative role due to our minimal staffing in Eastern Idaho and some transfers that had taken place, which further diminished our staffing. I carried several investigative assignments within this case.
Do you recall, as part of your assignments in this case, looking into some iCloud accounts?
Yes, I did.
Do you know who those iCloud accounts were associated with?
Yes, they were associated with Lori Vallow.
And do you recall the names on those accounts?
Yes, there were two accounts. The first account was called Lori 4 Style with the number 4. And the second account was called Lolly Time.
And when you looked at these iCloud accounts, could you tell how long they'd been in existence?
Yes.
And what did you learn regarding that?
So the first account, Lori for Style, was the oldest account. It was the bulk of that account started in 2016, but there were some materials that were present there as early as 2011, 2012. And then Lolly Time was more recent. It essentially started July 1st of 2019.
And when you were reviewing these, could you tell if some messages had been deleted? What exactly were you able to see in relation to any messages or the content there?
So the content on both iCloud accounts is extremely voluminous. We utilized a software system called Cellbrite, which doesn't change any of the data within the iCloud, but organizes it in a way that makes it reviewable. For instance, there will be a section for SMS or text messages, a section for videos and photographs and contacts and Bluetooth and on and on and on. And so this software just takes the mirrored image of the iCloud account and organizes it into its component parts. And so I reviewed all of those component parts for both of the iCloud accounts.
And you mentioned that both of these accounts had voluminous information on them.
Yes.
And in preparation for your testimony today, did you create a summary exhibit?
I did.
And does the summary exhibit contain some content from Lolly Time?
The summary exhibit for today is almost exclusively from Lolly Time, with the exception of one slide, which is from Lori for Style.
And do you believe that this would assist and aid you in your testimony today?
Yes, it would.
Do you believe it would aid the jurors in understanding the evidence?
Yes, I do.
Your Honor, I have what's been marked as State's Exhibit 183. I have provided a copy to counsel. I have a copy for the court, as well as a courtesy copy for Your Honor. As some of the other exhibits for the state, this will actually be, the actual exhibit will be a jump drive containing the PowerPoint, but we have the slides printed off for courtesy.
Okay.
Yeah, so she started that Lolly Time.
And if I can have the witness shown a copy.
On July
Yes.
1st, 10 days before Charles was killed.
Could you turn your microphone on, please, Mr. Pryor?
Begin with a note. Judge, my only objection is I would like the officer, it was agent, I'm sorry, officer, deputy, that's acceptable, to just make note of the range that this summary encompasses, if we could, date, ending date, beginning date.
Certainly, the begin.
This is just part of the admissibility here. Ms. Blake, the witness is being handed that. It sounds like provisionally there's no objection, but if we could identify, and it'll be helpful for the record too, just the date that this encompasses. Date range.
Yes. Agent, are you able to tell us the date range that this would cover?
This exhibit covers a date range of January 2019 through, I believe it is August of 2019.
And is there a reason that that is what the time frame within this exhibit?
Yes, the pertinent portions of the iCloud for today's testimony exist within that specific time frame.
And through the investigation, did you learn when Chad and Lori first met?
Yes,
What did you learn in relation to that?
they met on October 26th, 2018.
And so this exhibit would begin several months after their first meeting?
Yes, it does. There are communications that reference the time frame of their meeting in 2018, but those communications are dated July of 2019.
And through the investigation, did you learn the last known day that Tylee Ryan was seen?
Yes.
And what was that day?
The last known date that Tylee Ryan was seen was September 8th of 2019.
Did you learn the last day JJ Vallow was seen?
Yes, the last day that JJ Vallow was seen was September 22nd of 2019.
And did you also learn the day that Tammy Daybell was declared dead?
Yes, Tammy Daybell was declared dead on October 19th of 2019.
And through the investigation, did you learn when Chad and Lori got married?
Yes, they were married in Hawaii on November 5th of 2019.
And when you became involved in the investigation initially, JJ and Tylee were still missing, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Your Honor, it's my understanding then the exhibit would be stipulated to?
All right, with those dates determined, Mr. Pryor, any objection?
Judge, it's not stipulated to, but there is no objection to the exhibit.
Okay, well then, without objection, States Exhibit 183 is admitted. The court noting the actual exhibit will be the PowerPoint presentation file on a digital drive. The court has a courtesy copy as well as counsel, and the witness is referring to printed versions that are derived from that PowerPoint presentation.
And Your Honor, I guess just to ensure the record is clear as well, the iCloud accounts have been stipulated to that this content's pulled from.
Okay, and I will note that as well. Thank you.
And that is correct, Judge. These have been stipulated as part of the record.
Okay.
And Your Honor, with that, the state would ask permission to publish.
Yes, you may publish.
Oh boy, here we go.
Agent Hart, when you created this exhibit, did you pull over the content from these iCloud accounts?
I did.
So do some of these contain potential spelling errors, things of that nature?
Yes. Most of what we'll see today are text messages. And so the Cellbrite software arranges them in a reverse chronological order and assigns each text message a line number. Associated with that is a date and a time for the text, and then who it was to or from, and then the actual content of the text. And so I cut and pasted the content of the text exactly as it appears in the iCloud account.
Thank you. And with that, would you go ahead and read these messages into the record?
Yes. This sheet is from the SMS section of Lori for Style at iCloud.com. Line number 2585, January 23rd, 2019, 5:18 p.m. Text from Lori Vallow to Audrey Baratario. Hi, Audrey. This is Lori. I would love to talk to you sometime. Text me or call me. I'm excited to be able to talk to you about what we both know. Line number 2584.
Judge, could we approach?
Yes.
I think this was the same detective or agent who read off the messages in Lori's trial, because when he started to read off Lori's message there, I had a flashback of the same exact voice reading messages on the witness stand for Lori's trial. So I'm pretty sure it's the same guy. And it sounds like Mr. Pryor's trying to get this off of get these exhibits out. But Mr. Pryor, I'm not quite sure how successful you're gonna be.
Okay, that's okay. Okay, okay, right? Okay, right? Okay, right? Right? Okay, okay, okay.
Maybe he should start using another, end cap to his sentences like this.
Perfect. Perfect. Thank you so much for that clarification. Perfect. Thank you so much for that clarification. Okay, perfect. Perfect. Yes. Okay, perfect. Perfect.
Okay, perfect. Okay, perfect. Oh, man. The courtroom cracks me up.
Something really wrong is going on. Mr. Kirkland, you are out of order. You're out of order. You're out of order. The whole trial is out of order. They're out of order.
That man. Are you going to stay away from the word okay now as well, Stacy? I'm kidding.
All right, Ms. Blake, if you'd like to continue with direct, you may.
Thank you, Your Honor. Agent Hart, if you could go ahead and continue reading those into the record.
Yes. Line number 2584. January.
I'm going to object at this point on the basis that this is cumulative. There's a record that's already been established with the exhibit. And to just require the officer to read the remainder is cumulative in my opinion.
All right, response from the state.
Thank you, Your Honor. The state's position is it is not cumulative. While the state recognizes it is an exhibit, it's also a summary exhibit that we heard testimony from the agent that this would aid in his testimony today, that he believes it would aid the jurors in understanding. While it is what's on the screen, so long as it's read as to what's appearing on the screen, the state's position is in no way is this cumulative evidence. So we would ask that the judge overrule that objection and allow us to move forward with testimony.
And Judge, briefly in response is that the exhibit is what it is, and it's clear for the jury to look at that and read that. It doesn't necessitate the prosecutor to go line by line over a massive exhibit.
I am going to sustain the objection in that I would find it be somewhat, well, it is cumulative to have a written version of all of the messages and then to simply have a witness read through all of the written messages when they're already being published and the jurors are all capable of reading them as well. I'll sustain that in that I just don't want to have the entire thing read into the record. I don't know that that's necessary, but if you want to have any time or assurance to make sure the jurors have read the messages and direct the witness to any of the specific messages that are contained in there, certainly you can go there, Ms. Blake, but just the wholesale reading of all the messages, I do find the objection is sustained.
Bum, 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 bum. I wonder if Miss Blake was prepared for this, because what he did say.
Agent Hart, when we look at these messages, looking at the first one there, appears to be a message from Lori sent to Audrey.
That's correct.
Can you tell us if you learned through the investigation, who Audrey Baratario is?
Audrey Baratario was a friend and associate of Chad Daybell.
And did you learn through the investigation how she came to be in contact with Lori?
Chad Daybell introduced her to Lori Vallow.
And when we look at that first message, is there something about that initially caught your attention?
Yes, it's the line where Lori indicates to Audrey that she's excited to be able to talk about what we both know.
And then did you look at that in conjunction with the response from Audrey to Lori?
Yes, Audrey indicates states that she guesses Lori has talked to Chad. And so it's clear from this particular text string that there's a reference by Lori Vallow to Audrey Barriaterio about what Lori, Audrey, and Chad Daybell know.
And Your Honor, may I ask that the witness be handled a laser pointer if we have one available?
Yes, I do think we have one.
Thank you. And Agent Hart, if at any point that's helpful.
Okay.
That.
So what do they know? What is it that they know?
And then was there some significance to these other messages in relation to those first messages?
Yes, mainly in the fourth line where it says by Lori to Audrey that she thinks it's fun to talk to someone who knows what's really going on. Again, a reference to something between the three of them.
And again, this was in January of 2019.
Correct.
If we move to the next slide, I'm going to pause to give the jurors a chance to look through that.
See,
Yes.
that was right before Charles died. And Lori's contacting somebody in Chad's life about what they know. Very circumstantial, but interesting.
And Agent Hart, when we look at these messages, we have the name Melanie Boudreau. Did you learn through the investigation who she is?
Yes, she is Lori Vallow's niece.
And there's a reference in that first email to someone named Brandon. Do you know who Brandon is?
Yes, these are text messages, not emails, but Brandon is Melanie's husband or soon to be ex-husband. They were in the process of separating and getting a divorce.
And there's also the name Al. Do you know who Al would be referencing?
Only by the content of the text. I have never met or spoken with Allie Bloomer or her husband.
And what caught your attention about these particular messages?
These messages and then the next two slides are a continuation of this text string, demonstrate several significant things that are relevant to this investigation.
That being, was there an objection?
And in that, in the very last message, it appears to be a message from Chad to Lori.
Correct.
And what did that appear to be an indication Chad was going to do?
So during the investigation.
Objection, Judge, that was going to call for speculation.
Overruled.
During the investigation, we came to know that Chad Daybell purported to have the ability to assign an individual as being either dark or light, and he would give them a score. And Lori Vallow and others would seek Chad's visions as it related to assigning people as being either dark or light. And so this is one of the first references we see in the iCloud account where Lori Vallow is seeking from Chad Daybell, or Chad Daybell rather offers that he will check Allie Bloomer and her husband, meaning he will see what their scores are.
Direct
and
tie.
then looking at
Direct
that
tie.
first message, it references that Brandon is making me promise not to have you or Al around my house or kids. Do you know who that Al is?
Yes, that's Alex Cox, Lori's brother.
And then you had already indicated this next slide is a continuation. I'm just going to pause to give the jurors a chance to read through that. And when you looked at these messages, was there anything on these that stood out to you?
Yes, primarily in line 3000, where Chad Daybell responds back approximately 8 minutes later, giving Lori Vallow these scores. He assigns Allie Bloomer as being 4.1 dark, and her cop husband is a 3 dark.
That's
And
very
so
dark.
those are
Very, very dark.
coming from Chad Daybell to Lori Vallow in reference to this issue that's come up with Melanie Boudreau.
And if we look at the line 2996, is Lori passing that information along?
Yes, and this is a pattern that we see repeatedly, that Lori Vallow would solicit Chad Daybell's advice or visions. Chad Daybell would respond, and then Lori Vallow would disseminate that out to whoever was making that inquiry.
And if we move to the next slide, I believe you indicated this is also a continuation of that conversation.
Correct.
I'm just going to pause here to give the jurors a moment to look through that.
Yes.
Just imagine being one of Lori's friends, thinking she's this wonderful person, or just at least being acquainted with her. Maybe you don't like her. Whatever. But you don't think she's like capable of plotting murder against you.
When we look at these messages, if we
And then you
start with
find
the
out
new one, there's a reference to checking for recording devices. Did anything about that catch your attention?
Yes.
And then did it catch your attention in reference to the following messages?
It
Or is it
did.
related?
It did. So subsequent to seeking those scores on Allie Bloomer and her husband, Lori Vallow then makes a request to Chad Daybell to clear Melanie Boudreau's house and also check it for recording devices. And so Chad Daybell responds that he'll do that and that he's having to break down some dark entries Brandon created, and that he detects 3 listening devices. And that answer is then passed on directly from Lori Vallow to Melanie Boudreau, referencing Chad Daybell as Melanie Boudreau's father, and then verbatim passes on that message. So to me, this establishes once again.
Judge, I'm going to object. It's calling for speculation.
I'll overrule that. You can answer.
It establishes that the individuals within this group look to Chad Daybell as the supposed visionary who will give them these types of information.
And in these messages, when the request is made, Chad responds. Is that correct?
Yes.
They're giving him the godlike decisions.
I'm turning to the next slide. I'm again going to pause to allow the jurors a moment to look through that.
Very well.
But like, like every time I hear a name come out in this trial and it's related to, Chad and Lori, giving them some sort of
Agent Hart, when we look at the date on this
Crazy.
message, can you read the date?
I can, July 13th of 2019.
Do you know when Charles Vallow was killed?
He was killed on July 11th of 2019.
So just 2 days prior to this message.
Correct.
During this time, was Tammy Daybell still alive?
Yes.
Do you know who Adam, Leah, well, I'll stop there. Do you know who Adam is?
Yes.
And who is that?
Chad Daybell's son-in-law.
And do you know who Leah is?
Chad Daybell's daughter.
And do you know who Joe is?
Joe is also Chad Daybell's son-in-law.
What is it, outside of the date, what else about this message drew your attention?
There were a couple of things that I think are significant in this message. The first
pretty much, Chopper,
is this line where Chad Daybell says, "I feel she will be gone by then," which is a reference to the pending death of Tammy Daybell.
Judge, objection. That calls for speculation.
I'll strike that last part of the answers. Insufficient foundation.
Based on your investigation, who did you believe the she to be?
Tammy Daybell.
It calls for speculation. I'll renew my objection, Judge.
And Your Honor, I think based on his investigation, I'm asking who he believed this message to be referencing.
Judge, can we approach, please?
No, it's overruled, Mr. Pryor. Go ahead, Ms. Blake.
Who did you believe the her to be?
Snap.
Tammy Daybell.
Or I said her, but the word is actually she, the pronoun used, correct?
Correct.
Looking at the second to the last sentence, could you explain if there was anything about that drew your attention?
Yes, it helps tie in the line, "I feel she will be gone by then." So Chad Daybell tells Lori Vallow that the Lord has hinted to him that he might not get to be with Lori Vallow until after this graduation ceremony takes place on July 23rd, and asks Lori Vallow to, quote, "please ask about that."
If we turn to the next slide, again, I'm going to pause to allow the jurors to read that.
You mean how much time it has left? Chopper? In terms of
Agent Hart, looking at the date on this one, how many days ago had Charles been killed?
3 days prior.
And again, Tammy Daybell's still alive?
Yes.
Do you know, or did you learn through the investigation who Lily would be referencing?
Yes, Lily is another name for Lori Vallow.
Was there something about this that caught your attention?
There are two things about this communication that caught my attention.
Could you tell me what those were?
The first is the reference to joining Chad Daybell in the shower. They were physically, Lori Vallow was in Arizona, Chad Daybell was in Idaho at the time of this message. So there are repeated references to Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell having the ability to connect on a spiritual plane and be together spiritually. So this is just one example of that, but it's pertinent because it happens repeatedly and it could be easily confused that they were actually physically present together, which they were not. So that was the first thing that stood out.
And what was the next thing?
The next thing is the last line of Chad Daybell's text to Lori Vallow, where he says he loves her so immensely that the whole universe knows it, and very soon the people on this little blue globe will know it too, which demonstrates that their relationship was clandestine or secret at this point, and that at some future date, the relationship between Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow would be divulged by Chad Daybell.
And then moving to the next slide, again, I'm going to pause to allow the jurors time to read that.
It says, I love you so much. You are my greatest desire and my best friend. Now on with the story. They would both attend the same event in mid-November, and it seemed like that day would never arrive. Each day they opened their hearts to each other a little more. James knew he could trust her with the mysteries of the
Agent
universe that
Hart,
had
when we
revealed
look
to
at
him.
these messages, there is the name James and a name Elena referenced. Did you see those in this message?
Yes.
Were you able to determine through the investigation who James is referencing?
Yes, James is Chad Daybell.
And were you able to determine who Elena is referencing?
Yes, Elena is Lori Vallow.
And again, the date on these messages is how many days after Charles Vallow was killed?
This is now 3 days after he was killed.
Disgusting.
What is it about these particular messages that drew your attention?
Well, the James and Elena communications are very significant, and we see them first in the email section of the iCloud, starting on July 8th, continuing through July 9th, and through much of July. Chad Daybell is the author of these portions of a narrative or a history that chronicles Chad Daybell's meeting Lori Vallow and how their relationship developed. He refers to himself as James in this and to Lori Vallow as Elena, but in fact, this is autobiographical. It is based in fact. We verified the facts of the story as being correct and accurate to real events. And so in this, we have a description from Chad Daybell as to how he met Lori, and particularly several important events that occurred early on in their relationship.
And in this first one, there's an indication now on with the story. Were there other segments that came before this next message?
Yes, and it's very voluminous. And so what we're seeing here were portions that were sent via text message by Chad Daybell to Lori Vallow. But as I said, on July 8th is the first instance we see of a very lengthy narrative written by Chad Daybell, sent to Lori Vallow via email.
And again, during this time, Tammy Daybell is still alive?
She is.
In that second message, there's the indication they would both attend the same event in mid-November. Were you able to determine through the investigation if that occurred?
Yes, so that's a reference to November 15th through the 17th of 2018. So while this message was sent via text on July 14th of 2019, the narrative contained in the message is talking about a time period between the end of October and prior to November 15th through the 17th of 2018.
And the last sentence of that text, was there something that stood out there?
I think the entire text is pertinent, as well as that last sentence. In the middle, Chad Daybell states in this narrative that he and Lori Vallow had been married before, and references some past time with the Savior when he lived in Jerusalem. And Elena, or Lori, had been his beloved spouse and best friend. In the final line, he says that relationship was now meant to continue in this lifetime. So looking at this history, Chad is saying that after he met Lori Vallow, he knew that their relationship was now meant to continue in this lifetime, with the assertion that they had been married in a previous lifetime.
And again, you talked about, while this message is sent in July of 2019, that it's referencing events from 2018.
That's correct. Chad Daybell met Lori Vallow on October 26th of 2018 at a Preparing a People conference in St. George, Utah. That's chronicled in this history. In between their first meeting, there was a 3-week time period before they would physically meet again in Mesa, Arizona, November 15th through the 17th, 2018, at another Preparing a People conference. So the time period being referenced by Chad Daybell in this communication is that time period from the end of October 2018 until they meet again physically in November of 2018.
And when this is written, Charles and Tammy are still alive.
That is correct.
We go to the next one. And again, I'm going to pause here to let the jurors read it.
As James and Elena talked on the phone, he tried to delicately describe their connection to each other, and he was delighted that she believed him. He also shared that they had been married other times on a previous world, and she accepted that information as well. James was overjoyed to have these memories restored to him because he truly loved her with all of his heart. He knew they were meant to be married again and complete important missions together before the second coming. He was ecstatic that she was receiving confirmation that of these things as well. As they talked on the phone, the spiritual connection was so intense that it also produced physical desires, and it was as if their spirits were making love despite the great distance between them. James knew his spirit was visiting her during these conversations. He also became aware that his spirit would visit her at night, and they would wrap around each other in a sensual embrace. See what I mean? Kissing her was so wonderful and real, and he knew that the next time they saw each other, he needed to kiss her. He wouldn't be able to resist holding her. He was absolutely in love with her in every way. Teenage fever dream, right? That's not good writing.
And this message again has the date of July 14th of 2019, correct?
Yes, it does.
And could you talk a little bit about what it is about this message that caught your attention?
What caught my attention is that this is the first time Chad Daybell introduces to Lori Vallow the concept that they had lived as human beings at another time in the past, that they had been married to each other in the past, and that they were meant to be married again in this present time and complete these important missions together.
Judge, I'm going to object at this point, and I want to hear a native objection.
Oh, well, there's no pending question at this time. So if there was an objection, Mr. Pryor, this wasn't timely.
And again, Agent Hart, when we're seeing the James and Elena references and this story being drafted, it is referencing back to events that would have happened previously.
Yes, he is referencing events and phone conversations that took place between the end of October 2018 and just prior to November 15th through the 17th of 2018.
And again, when we're looking at this, Charles has been killed just 3 days before this message.
That's correct.
And in 2018, when this story's referencing back to 2018, Charles and Tammy were still alive.
Yes, Charles and Tammy were still alive. Lori Vallow was married to Charles Vallow, and Chad Daybell was married to Tammy Daybell during this time period that he's describing.
Judge, I'm going to object on response, or actually, Judge, I'll withdraw at this point.
All right. Go ahead, Ms. Blake.
There's also a reference in there, the line starting with, "He was ecstatic." Could you read that sentence in there?
He was ecstatic that she was receiving confirmation of these things as well.
Did that indicate anything to you?
Yes, in the first sentence, Chad writes that he tried to delicately describe their connection with one another and was in fact delighted when Lori Vallow believed him. And so this is Chad Daybell introducing these concepts of he and Lori having been married in a previous life.
And then later on, we see that she appeared to be getting confirmation of what Chad was telling her.
Correct.
Again, as a reminder, it's a common grooming ploy. Oh, hello. I know you. We were married in a previous life.
There's also reference in there to physical desires.
Yes.
With the talk of physical desires, making love, was there anything about those that caught your attention?
Well, it demonstrated the attraction of Chad Daybell to Lori Vallow instantly upon their meeting in October of 2018.
If we move to the next slide, and again, I'm going to pause to allow the jurors to read this.
Hanging in there, but really missed you too. Please find out the name of Mel's camp out in Utah. I have no intention of going, but I feel it's our avenue to get together, whether she is still there or not.
When we look at these messages, they are also dated July 14th of 2019. Is that correct?
Yes.
So they're making plans.
What was it about these messages that caught your attention?
This is a communication by Chad Daybell to Lori Vallow seeking an opportunity to be with her in person and using a camp out and a potential speaking assignment as a ruse to be able to leave Rexburg and go and be with Lori Vallow.
And there's a reference there in the first message, whether she is still here or not. Based on your investigation, did you determine who that she would have been referencing?
Tammy Daybell.
And in the James and Elena, we saw some reference to some kind of physical attraction. And then in these, what stood out is Chad and Lori are actually going to meet up in person here.
Yes, the investigation had revealed they had already met at several different times with travel to different places to be together for periods of 2 or 3 days. And in fact, we were able to verify that Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow did meet and were together during that July 24th through 26th timeframe that's referenced in the communication.
And July 24th to 26th, Tammy Daybell was still alive. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then if we go to the next slide, and again, I'm going to pause to allow the jurors to read this.
I need so badly to just gently kiss you for hours. It would likely lead to other activities. Likely or luckily, it would luckily lead to nakedness.
And again, these are a continuation of text messages from July 14th of 2019.
Correct.
And again, just 3 days after Charles Vallow's been killed.
Yes.
What about these messages drew your attention?
There was a lot of what we call sexting content in the iCloud that I examined. I included these communications as just a very, very small example that this was in fact a sexual affair. It was not an emotional affair or a spiritual affair. It's very clear that it's a physical sexual affair between Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow.
And moving to the next slide, again, I'm going to pause to allow the jurors to read this.
I know you won't let get this text for another hour or so, but my love for you is overflowing right now. I just want to hold you endlessly. You are wonderful, my best friend. I can't live without you. I can't live without. And yet you are so sad, missing you. I just landed. Gotta get to work. Kiss emoji, heart emoji.
And if we look at these, can you indicate the date on these messages for the record?
July 15th of 2019.
Brad style.
So these are moving to the next day from the previous messages.
Correct.
What is it about these particular messages that caught your attention?
This is an example of how Lori Vallow sought to manipulate Chad Daybell in the immediate aftermath of Charles Vallow's death.
And in that text from Chad to Lori, could you read the last line?
He says, "You are my wonderful best friend that I can't live without."
And again, during this time, Tammy Daybell is still alive.
Correct.
And the manipulation that you're indicating is Lori's response there. Could you read the first line?
Yes, she replies, "And yet you are so sad, missing you."
Referencing back to his message to her that he couldn't live without her.
Correct. Chad Daybell tells Lori Vallow how much he loves her and he can't live without her. And her response to that is, "And yet you are, in fact, living without me. So sad."
And moving to the next slide, again, I will pause to allow the jurors to read.
I just got the letter from the insurance company saying that I am not the beneficiary. It's a spear through my heart. Who do you think he changed it to? Brandon or probably Kay? He left nothing for JJ. Wow, that's terrible. There's no way to find out. I might be able to see when I get his computer on Sunday. I could check. I could check either emails sent to the insurance company. It will show change of beneficiary. He must.
And could you indicate the date on these messages for the record?
July 18th of 2019.
7 days after.
What about these messages stood out to you?
Well, this is a series of texts that occupies this slide and the next 3 slides, all regarding the same subject, and that is Lori Vallow has just found out that she is not the beneficiary to Charles Vallow's $1 million life insurance policy.
And she's telling Chad that.
Correct.
Going to the next slide, I'm going to pause to allow the jurors to read.
It seems you would have to agree to the change. Maybe your name was forged. You should have a good paper trail to prove it. I love you. This is terrible, but it is probably another step in bringing down the Gadiantons, especially Brandon. Ooh. Nope. He can change it anytime he wants. He's the agent, and anyone can change their beneficiary anytime with their own signature.
And you indicated this is a continuation of the previous slide, correct?
Correct, as well as the next 2 slides.
In looking at this particular slide, there's a reference to bringing down the Gadiantons, especially Brandon.
Yes.
Through the investigation, did you determine who that Brandon would be that is being referenced?
That is Brandon Boudreau, Melanie Boudreau's soon-to-be ex-husband.
Through your investigation, did you learn anything in relation to Brandon and an investigation involving him?
Yes.
What did you learn?
What could you clarify? What did we learn about?
Yes, sorry. Did you learn anything about an incident being investigated by the Gilbert Police Department involving Brandon as a victim?
Yes.
And what did you learn regarding that?
On November 2nd of 2019, as Brandon Boudreau was pulling in his driveway of his home in Arizona, an individual shot at him with a rifle, narrowly missing him.
And you said November 2nd. Is it possible it was October 2nd?
I'm sorry, you are correct. It is October 2nd. Excuse me.
And that was October 2nd of 2019.
Correct.
Do you know, did the reference bringing down the Gadiantons mean anything, or did you learn what that was referencing?
I learned that that is a reference. The name Gadianton has to do with a group of people that's referenced in a book of scripture called the Book of Mormon. The Gadiantons were robbers and thieves. And so the word Gadianton is indicative of someone who is a thief or a robber or a bad individual.
And as Lori's telling Chad that she's no longer the beneficiary, can you read the last text into the record?
Yes, that's a text from Chad Daybell to Lori Vallow. It says, it will be interesting if it got changed after he had 2 bullets in his chest.
And going to the next slide, I'm going to pause to allow the jurors to read.
I don't think it could have. You can't change it after the death date. they would review that. Yes, I'm thinking Kay as well. She's probably freaking out that you got those computers. I'm going to shower and give you a blessing. I'm eager to get home so we can talk. It really will be okay, my love. You are wonderful. So I talked to the insurance company. He changed it in March.
And Agent Hart, I think you indicated this is also a continuation from the previous two slides. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
So it was probably Ned before.
There's some additional references on this particular slide that stood out to you, or particular statements.
Yes, primarily the last line.
And what was it about that that stood out to you?
That's a text from Lori Vallow to Chad Daybell. And so she had found out that the beneficiary for the life insurance policy had been changed in March of 2019. And then she says, so it was probably Ned before we got rid of him. Ned is the name of the supposed dark entity that Chad Daybell had assigned to Charles Vallow.
And then there's a reference there before we got rid of him, correct?
Correct.
Did you learn what the $4,000 a month from SS was in reference to through the investigation?
Yes, that's a reference to money that would still be coming to Lori Vallow through Social Security for her children, primarily for JJ.
And then if we move to the next slide, again, I'm going to pause to allow the jurors to read.
Very well.
Found it. Ned gave all of it to Rhonda. Glad you found that out. It fits. Now she will try to take him. Thanks for working on her, working on me too. Reading this stuff makes me sick. We will work hard on Rhonda when we are together. I will get her numbers as low as I can by Wednesday. What? Good, let's work on it hard. What?
And when we
Rhonda
look
is
at this
A.
slide, can you read the date on these messages into the record?
Yes, these 5 messages are all from July 21st of 2019.
Rhonda is K, and they were working
We've
on
talked
making
about
our-
who Ned is. Through the investigation, did you learn who Rhonda is that's being referenced?
Yes, Rhonda is the name assigned to the dark spirit or dark entity that Chad Daybell assigned to Kay Woodcock.
Judge, I'm going to object on foundation.
Sustained.
Agent Hart, as part of your investigation, did you review other documents?
Many, yes.
Did you review other reports?
Yes.
Did you discuss this matter with other investigators?
Yes.
And based on your review in this case, did you determine who Rhonda was referencing?
Yes.
And who?
And I'm going to renew my objection, Judge. You can talk about all the reports you want, but unless they get into specifics, telling me how he came to that conclusion, which documents, when, where, and time, it's still not sufficient foundation.
For purposes of this direct, I do find there's sufficient foundation. I'll overrule the objection. You can cross on that, of course, Mr. Pryor, when it's your chance for cross-examination.
Who did you determine Rhonda to be referencing?
Kay Woodcock, who is Charles Vallow's sister.
Now, there's references in some of these messages as well to working on someone. Through your review of the iCloud and messages, did you determine anything in relation to those working on, or did that stand out to you?
Yes, this is a phrase that we see repeatedly in the iCloud, and it actually has a dual meaning. When they're referencing somebody who Chad Daybell has determined to have a dark spirit or a dark entity working on them, has a negative connotation. When it's someone who's determined to be light or good, then working on them is an uplifting or a building connotation.
Agent Hart, as we've reviewed some of these messages that were around or shortly after Charles' death, we're seeing some of them. In your review of the messages, did you ever see any signs of grief or sorrow from Lori Vallow?
No,
Did you ever see any signs of grief or sorrow from Chad Daybell?
none.
Those monsters.
If we go to the next slide again, I'm going to pause to allow the jurors to read.
James and Elena had agreed to visit the temple the following morning. She returned to the hotel room, and after additional romance on the couch, they calmed their nerves enough to give each other a blessing. As James placed his hands on her head, he connected with Elena's true eternal self. He knew he was in the presence of an exalted goddess who had returned to Earth to perform a special mission. This mission included being with him, and they would progress together as translated beings. The full plan wasn't yet completely clear to him, but the immense power radiating from her confirmed his belief that she was among the greatest women in the universe.
And would you read the date of this message into the record?
July 21st of 2019.
And we've talked about James and Elena before, and this story, again, it references a prior period of time than when the message was being sent. Is that correct?
Yes. So at this point in this narrative, the dates are, this would be November 15th of 2018.
And we saw a previous slide dealing with that same time frame. Is that correct?
The previous slides were actually talking about that period of time between the end of October and prior to November 15th of 2018. This particular story talks about when Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow are now physically together in Mesa, Arizona on November 15th of 2018.
And through the investigation, did you learn if Chad Daybell was in fact in Arizona in November of 2018?
Yes, we verified that he was present on that specific date. We verified that he spoke at a Preparing a People conference there during those dates of the 15th through the 17th of November 2018, and verified that he was physically present at other locations as well.
And outside of the continuation of the James and Elena, were there specific things in this message that drew your attention?
Yes.
What were those?
Primarily that there was a plan that had been revealed or communicated to Chad that wasn't entirely clear to him yet, but it included them, meaning Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow, being together at the present time.
So specifically, the plan was being revealed to Chad.
Correct.
And there's a reference of Chad and Lori having a mission together?
Yes.
And moving to the next slide, I'm again going to pause to allow the jurors to read.
They embraced following the blessings, and the emotions they felt were a mixture of eternal bliss and celestial desire. The sexual chemistry was undeniable, but the spiritual unity was a glorious bonus for them both. They had only known each other for 3 weeks, but two lonely, misunderstood souls had finally found their best friend that they could trust and confide in. And then Lori says, she loves it. Oh my God.
And Agent Hart, these messages were also sent on July 21st of 2019. Is that correct?
Yes.
In looking at these particular messages, was there anything that stood out to you?
Yes, they're very insightful in that Chad, in his own words, is explaining the feelings he had for Lori Vallow within 3 weeks of meeting her, that they had progressed through this relationship. They had finally found their best friend that they could trust and confide in.
And again, the period of time this message is referencing, both Lori and Chad were married to other people?
Correct.
And Lori Vallow responded to this message. Can you read her response?
She loves it.
Heart emoji. Yeah.
And there's the reference in there to the 3 weeks. And would this have been, was the meeting in November about 3 weeks after Chad and Lori met in real life?
Yes, that's verified.
Moving to the next message, again, I'm going to pause to allow the jurors to read.
They arrived at the temple and they both felt they should do sealings together. That's marriages. They were soon seated in a sealing room facing each other. Elena looked so stunning as she smiled at him. She seemed calm while he felt nervous. Their opportunity soon came to kneel across the altar from each other. And as a sealer pronounced, that was Jason Mao, as a sealer pronounced those sacred words, James and Elena knew that they were now sealed as husband and wife for eternity. They were both married, y'all. As the earthly sealing was taking place.
And would you read the date of this message into the record?
This is also July 21st of 2019.
And this is a continuation of the James and Elena story being written?
Yes.
Are you aware of which time period this message is referencing?
This is referencing a specific date of November 16th, 2019, or excuse me, 2018.
And was there something about this particular part of the story that drew your attention?
There were multiple things that drew my attention to this that I believe are pertinent to the investigation.
Can we go through those one by one?
Sure.
What is the first one that drew your attention?
So the first is that Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow went to an LDS temple that has been verified. They attended the temple in Gilbert, Arizona on November 16th of 2018 together. And that they then participated in a ceremony that is a proxy ceremony for marrying people who have already been deceased.
And again, that was verified that they were at that temple together.
Yes.
And they reference the proceeding. After that, there's an indication in here, if you can read from the James and Elena knew.
James and Elena knew that they were now sealed as husband and wife for eternity.
Did that line stick out to you?
Yes. This is Chad Daybell's writing stating that when he and Lori participated in this proxy ceremony, that somehow through that, they had become once again married for eternity.
And then if we go to the last sentence starting with they knew, would you read that into the record?
Yes. They knew they had just begun a new journey together that was eternal and never ending.
Was there something about that particular line that caught your attention?
Yes, this is the beginning of their relationship and continuation of that relationship in the coming months that encapsulate the time period of this investigation and the crimes that are alleged.
And if we go to the next slide, again, I'm going to pause to allow the jurors to read.
It's making me so happy to read about your life that I'm finally going to dance, missing you and loving you from afar. It was great. I feel free again. I love you more than ever. I can't wait to be with you forever. I'm begging Father and Mother. That's my job tonight. I will be right beside you, begging just as much. I need you desperately.
And these messages were also exchanged on July 21st of 2019. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right.
And in looking at these messages, were there things that caught your attention?
Yes, two things primarily.
And can you walk us through those?
Yes. The first is that Lori Vallow responds to those prior clips that Chad wrote about James and Elena, saying, "It's making me so happy to read about our life," which is a verification that this is an autobiographical or factual account.
And then what is the next thing?
The next is the line from Lori Vallow to Chad Daybell, which says, "I love you more than ever. I can't wait to be with you forever. I'm begging Father and Mother. That's my job tonight." To which Chad Daybell responds, "I will be right beside you, begging just as much. I need you desperately."
And what, if anything, did that indicate to you about Chad and Lori's relationship?
That they had a clear plan to be with each other, to be together forever, and that they were both begging God for that to happen.
And again, when these messages are being exchanged, is Tammy Daybell still alive?
She is.
In your review of these iCloud accounts, was there ever any indication of Chad planning on getting a divorce?
None.
Ever any indication of Chad planning on getting separated?
No.
Moving to the next slide, and again, I'm going to pause to allow the jurors to read. And could you please read the date of these messages into the record?
July 22nd of 2019.
You just talked about the previous slide indicating a plan to be together.
Correct.
What is it about these particular messages that stood out to you?
Again, there are a couple of different things that stood out as relevant. The first is the text from Chad Daybell to Lori Vallow referencing going to see a movie with Garth, who is his son. He then says, "Missing you desperately, but so excited to be with you." If you'll recall from a prior slide, there's a plan July 24th through the 26th for Chad and Lori to be meeting in person. And so the first line is a reference to their in-person meeting that's coming up.
And then looking at Lori's response, is there something in there that drew your attention?
Very much. She said, I love you. You will enjoy the scenery. Looks like Kauai a lot. And then responds with another text saying, hopefully we will be there someday soon together.
So there's a reference to Kauai.
Yes.
Do you know where Kauai is located?
Yes, it's in Hawaii, the Hawaiian Islands.
What's Chad's response to that?
Chad's response is significant. He says, that is the plan, exclamation point, and my greatest desire.
That is the plan. Boom. The internet's forever, baby.
And then we talked about Kauai being in Hawaii. Looking at Chad's final sentence there of the last message, could you read that into the record?
Yes. I look forward to being on a tropical island with you.
I asked you earlier if you knew when Chad and Lori got married. Do you recall when that was?
November 5th of 2019.
Do you know where they got married?
I do.
Where was that?
Kauai.
Do you know where Chad and Lori relocated eventually after getting married?
Kauai.
During the time those messages are being exchanged, was JJ Vallow still alive?
He was.
Was Tylee Ryan still alive?
She was.
Was Tammy Daybell still alive?
Yes, she was.
Moving to the next slide. Again, I'm going to pause to allow the jurors to read.
I'm home, missing you immensely and feeling very tired. But I had a splendid time with you, my love. We'll text again soon. Tonight I figured out who I feel like. I'm a grown-up version of Harry Potter who has to live with the Dudleys in his little space under the stairs. This is Chad talking. Every few weeks I get to escape and have amazing adventures with my goddess lover. But then I have to return to my place under the stairs feeling trapped. But I sense permanent freedom is coming. The internet's forever, idiot.
And Agent Hart, can you read the date these messages were sent into the record?
July 26th of 2019.
Looking at these messages, did certain parts of them catch your attention?
Very much so, yes.
And what is it about them that caught your attention, if you can walk us through that?
Well, the time frame is important. So these messages were sent as Chad Daybell was returning home from having spent 2 or 3 days from the 24th through the 26th with Lori Vallow. So he references that he's just gotten home, back to his home in Rexburg, and that he had a splendid time with her. And then he follows up with a narrative or sentiment that he believes or feels that he's a grown-up version of Harry Potter who has to live with the Dudleys in a little space under the stairs. And then every few weeks he gets to escape and have amazing adventures with his goddess lover. The part that to me is most significant is the final sentiment where he says, then I have to return to my place under the stairs, feeling trapped. But I sense permanent freedom is coming, exclamation point.
The cross-examination ought to be interesting.
And you indicated he just returned from the weekend or from the time with Lori, correct?
Yes, these messages were sent upon his return back to his home in Rexburg.
So he's referencing being back home with his family. He feels trapped.
Correct.
Looking at the next slide, and again, I'm going to pause to allow the jurors to read. And Agent Hart, if you can read the date these messages were sent into the record.
July 28th of 2019.
What about these messages stood out to you?
There's a couple of things. This is in reference, just for context, to a trip that Lori Vallow was planning to take with Melanie Boudreau and Alex Cox to Southern California.
And in these, we see a message from Chad to Lori about no privacy here to hardly text. Do you happen to know where Chad would have been located at that time?
Judge, objection, foundation.
Sustain.
With these messages, was there any through your investigation, was there any indication that Chad Daybell was going on a trip?
No.
The indication was Lori Vallow was going on a trip.
Correct.
So based on your investigation, Chad wasn't leaving his home.
Correct.
Judge, objection. This is leading.
Well, it was, but it's already been asked and answered.
Then we see, looking at that third message on there, the text from Lori to Chad, is there something about that that drew your attention?
Yes, this is approximately 2 weeks after Lori Vallow's husband, Charles Vallow, has been killed. She is now free from her marriage. Chad Daybell is not free from his marriage. And she says, I need a distraction while I'm waiting for you. And he replies, absolutely, I think you'll have a fun time.
And turning to the next slide, I'm going to pause to allow the jurors to look at these.
These are hard to, I can't make these out even zooming in as far as I can. They look like receipts and forms.
And
Counsel, could I have a quick sidebar?
Ooh, sidebar. I think he's going to lunch. Isn't it interesting? Judges are starting to call sidebars about schedules now rather than just saying, hey, counsel, you're ready for lunch? It's beyond comprehension, Christina. Another one that kills me is Suzanne Morphew's daughters. And I understand it. Like I even made a video about it. What it's like to be the daughter of a psychopath, because I know what that's like. And I do believe Morphew is guilty. And the prosecution in that case screwed the F up so badly. Yeah, it does sound like she was trying to make him jealous, huh, Jamie Lee, when she said that. I need a distraction. I think I'll go get a distraction. The last I heard, Stacy, is they found Suzanne's remains. But that's it. You would think that, so they found Suzanne's remains like last year, mid last year or something like that. And I was sort of keeping my ears open for charges after that, but they haven't charged So maybe there weren't enough
All
remains.
right, thank you,
to figure
counsel.
out how she died.
That last exhibit, I'll ask if the state would redact certain information off of that, and I'll permit time to do that. In addition, the court had previously discussed with counsel our scheduling for today, given that it's Friday and we've been through a long week. I'm going to suggest we break for the day. We have advised the jurors previously we might be stopping early today. Ms. Blake, is this a good time for us to break until Monday?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. Any objections from the defense?
No objection, Judge. Thank you.
All right, that will conclude evidence for this week. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, at this time, I do want to again admonish you, especially over this long weekend, please do not discuss the evidence you've heard here with anyone else, including amongst yourselves. You can only do that after deliberations begin. Please don't follow the case or investigate the case in any way so that you can remain objective and decide this case only on the facts and evidence you've seen here in court. With that admonishment then, thank you so much for your attentiveness this week. We will commence again 8:30 Monday with additional evidence in the state's case in chief. With that in mind, then we'll go ahead and conclude for the week.
All right.
All right. So that was a fairly interesting day of testimony, right? We hear the messages between Chad and Lori. And this morning was more of the cross-examination of Melanie Gibb. And yeah, I agree. This judge is pretty cool. I like the way he handles the courtroom. Speaking of that, though, let's go back to, and before we end here for the week on this trial, let's continue with Nate's explanation of what happened yesterday in the hallway when Pryor was trying to subpoena Melanie Gibb.
What she saw on behalf of the defense. And it appears she has avoided getting that subpoena for years. Mark Means, Lori Vallow's old attorney, tried the same thing during Chad Daybell's preliminary hearing in 2020, August of 2020. A bondsman showed up at Melanie Gibb's hotel, tried to serve her with a subpoena on behalf of Mark Means and Lori Vallow, and Gibb refused to take it. I wish I could have been in the hall. That would have happened in front of all of us, and it would have been something to see. So as if we thought that was the wild moment of the day. No, get ready. We have the next wild moment on tape. I say it's beyond the scope and within the bounds generally with the topics. He has to stay within the. So many of you were saying, well, how could she was already on the stand? Doesn't have to take the stand, and a bondsman hearing. So you can't, if you lie, shape up and turn off your phones. And the person didn't claim it. Like normally you kind of hold it up in shame and say, here, it was me. So because of that, the bailiff held us after the judge said go on break. So everybody in the audience was held in the courtroom while he told us to shape up and turn off your phones. While this was happening, and he swears to me, the bailiff told me he did not purposely hold us back. He had no clue what was going on. But a lady who's been, I won't name her, but I know her, and she gave me the tip. She was outside in line waiting to get in for the next part of the court hearing. So you can't, if you leave, you can't go back in. She was waiting. She says, she told me that right when that morning session ended, Pryor came running out and said, where is he? Where is he? And then Melanie Gibb left the stand, and a bondsman or somebody came up to try to serve her papers and said, ma'am, these are for you. These are for you. Gibb said, I'm not taking those. Pryor said, you have to take them. And then the prosecutors walked out and said, she doesn't have to take those while she's on the stand.
Wow.
What? So this happened out there right in front of the courtroom. The attorney started to talk. And then after we went back in, the judge called them all back into his chambers for a discussion. We don't know what happened with the discussion. So many of you were saying, well, how could she was already on the stand? Why would John Pryor try to serve her with a subpoena? She's on the stand for the state. And there are rules like whatever the prosecutor asks, they can ask whatever because she's their witness.
I think you get the picture. So Pryor trying to cause a commotion. Looks like this has been something they've been trying to do practically ever since the case started, is the defense trying to subpoena Melanie Gibb to testify for them and her avoiding that subpoena. Interesting. So someone had asked a question earlier about timing, like how long is this case supposed to continue going? Oops, I didn't mean to do that. How long is it supposed to continue going? And they had slated this to last 8 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks, and they haven't really updated on whether they are moving faster or slower. They've said that they're moving a little faster, and they keep ending things earlier than scheduled. So I'm going to take a guess that maybe it's going to last maybe 4 to 5 weeks, because it feels like every time I cover a trial and the judge says, or the, parties say that it's going to last a certain amount of time, it ends up lasting like a week or two less. That's what I have found so far as I've been more and more closely watching these trials and covering them. So we'll see. But I do plan to also cover other trials that are popping up as well while this is. And, I've been giving updates on the Karen Reed case. It sounds like their jury has been seated, and they'll be starting soon. They'll probably start next week. So perfect. I'll leave you with some funny court clips, okay, to end the week, because you guys deserve to have to leave feeling good for the Friday, right? But first, let me just remind you why we're here. These are the reasons why we're here watching this case. These people, they're the victims. Okay, no matter all the other fluffery, these are the victims. These are the people who were really, really, really screwed out of all of this. So rest in peace to the victims, Tammy Daybell, JJ Vallow, and Tylee Ryan. And let's have a little bit of laughter on our way out.
Alfred!
Because she couldn't file on me.
I am going to advise you, Miss Oriani.
That's fine.
You do have the right not to incriminate yourself.
I do.
Don't know.
And I would not like to speak on anything that has to do with that.
Please talk.
Yep.
Thank you. Are you going to let me talk now? Are you going to interrupt me?
You can speak. Absolutely.
I appreciate that. Thanks for your permission.
This is your courtroom.
But then she attacks his girlfriend.
Dick pussy. Going back and forth between texts with one another, but I never want to hear it again.
All right, y'all. Thank you all for being here. Please remember to hit the thumbs up. Consider hitting that join button, becoming a member. Be on the lookout for my next scheduled live about this trial and other trials. And on my other channel, Checkmate Humanity, if you are so inclined to support the channel in other ways, here are my links. Thank you so much for being here, and have a fantastic, wouldn't want to be ya, have a fantastic weekend. Bye.